The night Ethan Cole's world collapsed, he found himself standing in front of a mansion with a rule that made no sense. No closed doors. What he didn't know was that this bizarre demand would save his life and nearly destroy it. This is the story of a single father who had nothing left to lose, a billionaire woman with secrets carved into every wall of her house, and the dangerous man who wanted to burn it all down. Stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. Ethan Cole's hands were shaking when he pulled into the driveway, and it wasn't from the cold. The engine of his 15-year-old Honda had been making a sound like a dying animal for the past 40 miles. A grinding, metallic whine that told him what he already knew. This car wasn't going to make it much longer. Neither was he, if he was being honest. The dashboard was lit up like a Christmas tree. Check engine, oil pressure, battery. He'd been ignoring those lights for 3 months now, the same way he'd been ignoring the overdue notices from the electric company, the second mortgage statement on a house he no longer owned, and the carefully worded emails from his academic advisor asking if everything was all right at home. Everything was not all right at home. Home was currently an extended stay motel off Route 9 that charged by the week and smelled like cigarettes and industrial cleaning solution. Home was his 7-year-old daughter, Maya, asking why they couldn't go back to their real house, the one with her bedroom and her toys and the tree swing Dad had built in the backyard. Home was Ethan lying to her every single night, saying it was temporary, saying things were going to get better, saying Dad had a plan. He didn't have a plan. He had $847 in his checking account, a partial scholarship to finish his graduate degree, and a crushing amount of pride that had kept him from asking for help until there was nowhere left to turn. The university housing wait list was 9 months long. Every apartment within 20 miles wanted first month, last month, security deposit, and proof of income he couldn't provide. His credit score looked like a bad joke. 3 weeks ago, he'd started sleeping in the car between classes while Maya was at school, just to save the motel money for another few days. That's when he'd seen the posting. Room for rent. Immediate occupancy historic property near campus. Private entrance. Utilities included. Affordable rate for the right tenant. Serious inquiries only. The address had surprised him. He knew that street. Everyone in town knew that street. Old Oak Drive was where the university's founding families had built their estates back when this had been timber country and railroad money. Those houses didn't rent rooms. Those houses had plaques from the Historical Society and got featured in alumni magazines. But Ethan had called anyway, because desperate men don't get to be picky. The woman who answered had a voice like cut glass, precise, elegant, and sharp enough to draw blood if you handled it wrong. "You're a student?" she'd asked. "Graduate student. Educational psychology. I'm in my 2nd year." "Family?" He'd hesitated. This was usually where things fell apart. "I have a daughter, 7 years old. She's..." "How soon can you move in?" The question had caught him off guard. As soon as you'd like?" "Tomorrow, 4 o'clock. Don't be late." She'd hung up before he could ask about the lease, the deposit, or any of the 100 other questions bouncing around his head. Now, sitting in the driveway as his car ticked and cooled, Ethan was starting to wonder if he'd made a massive mistake. The mansion in front of him looked like something out of a Gothic novel. 3 stories of dark brick and ivy, with tall windows that reflected the gray November sky like blank eyes. The property had to be at least 2 acres, surrounded by an iron fence that had seen better days. The grounds were immaculate, though, precisely trimmed hedges, a lawn that looked like it belonged on a golf course, flower beds mulched and ready for winter. Someone took care of this place. Someone with money. Which made the whole situation even stranger. Ethan grabbed his daughter's backpack from the passenger seat. Maya was still at school, wouldn't be done for another 2 hours, and stepped out of the car. His shoes hit the gravel drive, and he felt suddenly acutely aware of how he must look. Jeans with a hole in the knee that wasn't there for fashion. A jacket he'd bought at Goodwill 3 years ago. 2 days of stubble because he'd been too tired to shave. He'd been handsome once, or at least that's what his ex-wife used to say before everything went to hell. Now he just looked tired. He was halfway to his front door when he saw the sign. It was small, brass, mounted at eye level on the doorframe. The kind of thing you might hang to display house rules or a family name. But this one only had 3 words, engraved in neat capitals. No closed doors. Ethan stopped, read it again, looked around to see if this was some kind of joke. The door opened before he could knock. The woman standing in the doorway was not what he'd expected. Vivian Laurent was tall, taller than him by an inch, maybe two, with the kind of posture that came from years of someone telling you to stand up straight and actually listening. She was dressed like she'd just come from a business meeting. Black slacks, cream blouse, heels that probably cost more than his car. Her hair was pulled back in a way that was trying very hard to look effortless and almost succeeding. She was beautiful in that specific way that wealthy women often are, not because of genetics alone, but because they had the time and money to take care of themselves. Pilates and dermatologists and hairstylists who charged what Ethan made in a month. But there were cracks in the image if you looked close enough. Her eyes had the bruised, hollow look of someone who hadn't been sleeping well. There was a tightness around her mouth that spoke to pain being actively managed. And her hands were shaking slightly, though she'd tucked them behind her back like she didn't want him to notice. "Mr. Cole." It wasn't a question. She stepped aside, not quite welcoming, just making room. "You're early. I can wait outside if—" "No." The word was firm. "Inside." Ethan stepped past her into the foyer and had to work very hard not to stare. The entrance hall was the size of his old living room. Hardwood floors that gleamed like they'd been freshly waxed. A staircase that curved up to the second floor, all dark wood and wrought iron. Crown molding that had to be original to the house. A chandelier that looked like it cost more than a semester's tuition. "Shoes off," Vivian said behind him. He toed off his sneakers, suddenly aware of the hole in his left sock. She locked the door, 2 deadbolts and a chain, and moved past him with a slight limp she was trying to hide. Up close, he could smell her perfume, something expensive and floral that made him think of hotels he'd never be able to afford. "The room is upstairs," she said, "but first we need to discuss the terms." "Of course, the lease—" "There is no lease." She turned to face him fully, and her eyes were the color of steel. "This is a private arrangement, month to month. I don't report to the university, I don't run background checks, and I don't care about your credit score. The rent is $800 a month, utilities included. You can move in today. But there are rules." $800 a month. It was less than half what he'd been paying at the motel, less than anything he'd seen advertised in 3 months of searching. "What kind of rules?" he asked carefully. Vivian gestured to a doorway off the main hall. "We'll talk in the study." The study was exactly what you'd expect in a house like this. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, leather furniture, a desk that looked like it weighed more than Ethan did. There were papers spread across every surface, blueprints, financial documents, letters with university letterhead. Vivian swept them into a pile with one hand and sat down in the chair behind the desk. She didn't invite him to sit. He stood there like a kid in the principal's office. "The primary rule," she said, "is the one posted at the entrance. No closed doors. Not in the common areas, not in your room, not in the bathroom when you're showering. Doors remain open at all times." Ethan blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "You heard me." "You're saying I can't close my bedroom door? At night?" "That's exactly what I'm saying." "What about my daughter? She's 7. She needs privacy. She needs a roof over her head," Vivian interrupted. "Which is what I'm offering. The rule is non-negotiable. If you can't accept it, we're done here." Ethan felt heat rising in his chest. "That's insane." "Perhaps." Vivian's expression didn't change. "But it's my house, and those are my terms." "Why? What possible reason?" "That's not your concern." She leaned back in her chair, studying him the way a scientist might study a specimen under glass. "Here's what I know about you, Mr. Cole. You're a graduate student with a 7-year-old daughter and no partner in the picture. You're living in a motel off Route 9, the Sunrise Inn, I'm guessing, based on the area code when you called. Your car is about 2 oil changes away from the junkyard. You smell like stress and cheap coffee, and you've got the look of a man who's been making hard choices for a long time. So let me ask you something. Can you actually afford to say no?" The words hit like a slap. Because she was right, all of it, and that made it worse. "I have boundaries," Ethan said quietly. "My daughter has boundaries. And I have rules." Vivian stood up, smoothing her slacks. You want privacy? Rent somewhere else. You want safety and stability at a price you can actually afford? You follow my rules. It's that simple. It's not simple, it's controlling. It's honest. For the first time, something flickered in her expression, something raw and quickly buried. I don't lie to my tenants. I don't pretend to be something I'm not. This is the deal. Take it or leave it. Ethan wanted to leave. Every instinct in his body was screaming at him to walk out, get back in his dying car, and find another way. But there was no other way. He'd exhausted every option. The motel was almost out of money. Maya deserved better than sleeping in a car. Are there other rules? He asked. Several. Vivian walked to the window, looking out at the grounds. No guests without prior approval. No alterations to the property. Common areas are shared: kitchen, living room, library. You're responsible for your own cleaning and cooking, but you're expected to contribute to general household maintenance. The property requires upkeep. I'll provide a list. What about my daughter? School, after-school activities? Your daughter is your responsibility. I'm not a babysitter. She turned back to face him. But there's a room on the second floor that would work for her. It's smaller than the primary bedroom, but it has good light. Windows face east. And the door stays open, like every other door in this house. Vivian crossed her arms. Mr. Cole, I'm going to be blunt with you. You won't last a week here. Men like you, proud, stubborn, used to being in control. You can't handle living by someone else's rules. You'll move in, you'll make it 3 or 4 days, and then you'll find some excuse to leave because your ego can't take it. So I'm not particularly worried about long-term arrangements. Men like me. Ethan heard the edge in his own voice. You don't know anything about me. I know enough. She walked to the study door, which was standing open, and gestured for him to follow. Do you want to see the rooms or not? He should have walked away, should have told this controlling, presumptuous woman exactly where she could shove her open-door policy. But Maya's face flashed through his mind, the way she'd looked this morning when he'd told her they might have to stay at the motel another month, the way her smile had faltered just for a second before she'd hugged him and said it was okay. Show me the rooms, Ethan said. Vivian led him upstairs, that slight limp becoming more pronounced with each step. The second floor was just as immaculate as the first. Hardwood floors, oriental rugs, artwork that probably belonged in a museum. Every door they passed was open. He could see inside each room, a library with built-in shelves, a bathroom with marble counters, a sitting room with furniture that looked antique and uncomfortable. This would be yours, Vivian said, stopping at a door near the end of the hall. The bedroom was bigger than his entire motel room. King-sized bed, dresser, desk, 2 large windows with views of the property. The walls were painted a soft gray. There was a closet that could have been a second bedroom. And Maya's room? Vivian walked 3 doors down. Here. The second room was smaller, but it was perfect. Twin bed with a simple white comforter. Built-in shelves that Maya could fill with books. A window seat that overlooked the garden. Ethan could already picture her there, curled up with one of her fantasy novels, finally having a space that felt like hers. Bathroom is shared, Vivian said. It's between your 2 rooms. I'm on the 3rd floor, so you'll have this level to yourselves most of the time. Ethan looked at the rooms, looked at the open doors, looked at this strange woman who was offering him exactly what he needed, wrapped in the most bizarre conditions he'd ever encountered. Why are you doing this? He asked. You don't need the money. This house, your clothes, you could rent these rooms for 3 times what you're asking. So why? Vivian's jaw tightened. That's not your concern. You're asking me to live here with my daughter under rules I don't understand. That makes it my concern. For a long moment, she didn't answer. Then she walked to the window in Maya's room, looking down at the garden below. 5 years ago, she said quietly, I trusted someone. I let him into my house, into my life. I gave him privacy, gave him space, gave him every benefit of the doubt. And he nearly took everything from me. She turned back to face Ethan, and her eyes were hard again. The open doors aren't about control, Mr. Cole. They're about survival. I will never again let someone operate in the shadows under my roof. I will never again trust that closed doors mean privacy rather than deception. If you can't understand that, fine, but don't ask me to explain myself to you. The words hung in the air between them. Ethan thought about his ex-wife, about the lies and the cheating and the way everything had fallen apart when he'd finally opened the doors. He'd been too afraid to look behind. He thought about trust and how easy it was to lose and how some wounds never really healed. "I'm sorry," he said, "for whatever happened to you. I don't want your sympathy." Vivian straightened her shoulders. "I want to know if you're taking the rooms or not." Ethan looked at Maya's future bedroom one more time, at the window seat and the shelves and the space where his daughter could finally breathe. "We'll take them," he said. "Good." Vivian walked past him toward the stairs. "You can move in today. First month's rent is due immediately. Cash or check?" "Check okay?" "Fine." "Make it out to Vivian Laurent." She paused at the top of the stairs. "One more thing. The property is owned by the university's historical trust, but I manage it independently. That means you might see university officials occasionally, inspections, paperwork, that sort of thing. They have no authority over tenant arrangements, but they can be persistent." "Understood. I doubt that." She started down the stairs and Ethan followed. "The house was built in 1887 by my great-great-grandfather. It's been in my family ever since. Some people think it should belong to the university completely. Some people have made that opinion very clear. If anyone asks you questions about your living situation, you refer them to me. Are we clear?" "Crystal." They reached the front door. Vivian unlocked it, 2 deadbolts, 1 chain, and held it open. "When will your daughter be here?" she asked. "I pick her up from school at 3:30. Bring her by. I want to meet her before you move in." It wasn't a request. Ethan stepped outside, back into the cold November air. His car looked even more pathetic sitting in this driveway, surrounded by all this old money and carefully maintained history. "Mr. Cole?" Vivian's voice stopped him. "I meant what I said. You won't last a week, but I hope you prove me wrong." She closed the door before he could respond. Maya met Vivian 3 hours later, and it went about as well as Ethan expected. "You live in a castle," Maya breathed, staring up at the mansion with wide eyes. "It's not a castle," Ethan corrected. "It's a house." "A really, really big house." Maya grabbed his hand. "Can I see my room? Does it have a tower? Castles have towers." "No tower, but it has a window seat." "What's a window seat?" "Oh." Before Ethan could answer, the front door opened and Vivian appeared. She'd changed out of the business clothes into slacks and a sweater, but she still looked like she was about to chair a board meeting. Maya, to her credit, didn't seem intimidated. "Hi," she said brightly. "I'm Maya. Are you the lady who lives in the castle?" Vivian blinked. "It's not a—" She stopped, seeming to recalibrate. "Yes, I'm Vivian. You must be Maya." "Yup, Dad says we're going to live here. Is that true?" "If your father follows the rules, yes." Maya cocked her head. "What rules?" "Maya," Ethan started, but Vivian cut him off. "The most important rule is that all doors stay open. No closed doors anywhere in the house." Maya frowned, thinking this through with the serious concentration only a 7-year-old could manage. "Even the bathroom?" "Even the bathroom." "But what if I'm—" She lowered her voice to a whisper. "Pooping?" Despite everything, Ethan saw the corner of Vivian's mouth twitch. Almost a smile. Not quite. "Even then," Vivian said, "though you can close the door most of the way, just not all the way." "That's weird." "Maya." Ethan squeezed her hand. "Manners." "It's okay." Vivian knelt down, wincing slightly as she did, so she was at eye level with Maya. "It is weird, but it's my rule and this is my house. Can you follow weird rules?" Maya considered this. "I guess so. I had a weird rule at my old school. We had to walk in a straight line everywhere, even to the bathroom. That was weird too." "Did you follow it?" "Mostly. Sometimes I zigzagged a little." "Well, in this house, you can zigzag all you want, but the doors stay open." "Deal." Maya stuck out her hand for a shake, and after a moment's hesitation, Vivian took it. "Would you like to see your room?" Vivian asked. "Yes, please." They went inside, and Ethan watched his daughter's face light up as she took in the foyer, the staircase, the chandelier. She ran from room to room on the second floor, exclaiming over every detail, the window seat, the built-in shelves, the view of the garden. "This is perfect," she announced, spinning in a circle in the middle of her new bedroom. "Can I decorate? Can I put up posters?" "Within reason," Vivian said. "No damage to the walls. I promise to be super careful." Maya looked at Ethan. Can we move in now, please? We need to get our stuff from the motel first. Okay, but can I stay here while you do that? I want a measure for where my books should go. Ethan glanced at Vivian, who gave a nearly imperceptible nod. All right, he said, but you follow Ms. Laurent's rules while I'm gone. Understand? I promise. Ethan headed back to the motel, and for the first time in months he felt something that might have been hope. Maybe this would work. Maybe they could make this strange arrangement function long enough for him to finish his degree, find a real job, build a life again. He was back 90 minutes later with everything they owned packed into the Honda. 2 suitcases of clothes, a box of Maya's toys and books, his laptop and school materials, and a trash bag full of random necessities that didn't fit anywhere else. It was depressing how little remained of their previous life. Vivian helped them unload, insisting despite Ethan's protests, and he noticed she kept favoring her right side, like something hurt that she didn't want to acknowledge. Are you okay? He asked when Maya was upstairs unpacking. Fine. The word was clipped. You're limping. Old injury. It flares up sometimes. I should nothing. Vivian set down the box she was carrying a little harder than necessary. I don't need medical advice from a tenant I met 4 hours ago. I wasn't trying to. Yes, you were. She met his eyes. Let me be very clear about something, Mr. Cole. We're not friends. We're not confidants. You live here. You pay rent. You follow the rules. That's the extent of our relationship. Don't mistake proximity for intimacy. The words stung more than Ethan wanted to admit. Understood, he said. They finished unloading in silence. That first night was strange. Ethan lay in bed, a real bed, in a real room with actual furniture, and stared at the open door. He could hear everything. Vivian moving around on the floor above. The old house settling and creaking, wind in the trees outside. Without the door closed, the sounds felt too close, too intimate. He got up twice to close it out of habit, catching himself both times. Maya had adapted faster. When he checked on her before bed, she was already asleep, one arm flung over her favorite stuffed rabbit, perfectly content in her new room with its open door. Somewhere around 2 a.m, Ethan heard footsteps. He sat up, listening. Someone was moving through the house. Slow, careful steps on the stairs, then down the second-floor hallway. He heard a door open, the bathroom, and then water running. Vivian. He should have rolled over and gone back to sleep. It was none of his business. But something in the way she'd moved, the careful slowness of it, bothered him. The water shut off. More footsteps, heading back toward the stairs. Then a sound that made his stomach drop. A sharp intake of breath, like someone trying very hard not to cry out in pain. Ethan was out of bed before he'd made a conscious decision. He stepped into the hallway just as Vivian reached the stairs. She was bent slightly, one hand pressed to her side, breathing in short, controlled bursts. Are you? She looked up, and her face went through several expressions in rapid succession: surprise, anger, embarrassment, before settling on cold fury. Go back to bed, she said. You're hurt. I'm fine. You're clearly not fine. This is exactly the kind of overstepping I was talking about. Vivian straightened with visible effort. My health is not your concern. You can barely walk. I've been barely walking for 5 years. The words came out sharp and bitter. I don't need your help, your pity, or your concern. Go back to bed. They stared at each other in the darkened hallway. Then Ethan did something stupid. He walked toward her. Stop, Vivian said. He didn't stop. He came close enough to see the pain in her eyes, the way she was holding herself together through sheer will. What happened to you? He asked quietly. None of your business. You're right. It's not. He took a breath. But I've seen that look before, that I'm fine face when everything actually hurts. My ex-wife used to do it. Different reasons, same expression, and I learned too late that ignoring it doesn't make it go away. This is not the same. I'm not saying it is. Ethan held up his hands. I'm just saying. You don't have to pretend. Not at 2 a.m. when there's no one around to see. Vivian's jaw tightened. For a moment he thought she might actually tell him what was wrong. Then her expression closed like a door slamming shut. Good night, Mr. Cole. She walked past him to the stairs, every step clearly costing her, and Ethan watched her go because there was nothing else he could do. When he finally went back to bed, sleep was a long time coming. The next morning, Maya had questions. Why is there a lady living upstairs? Because it's her house, sweetie. But why doesn't she have a family? I don't know. Is she lonely? Ethan poured cereal into bowls. Probably. We should invite her to breakfast. I don't think, Dad, it's rude to eat without asking. You always say that. She had him there. So 5 minutes later, Ethan found himself knocking on the doorframe of Vivian's third-floor study, which was, of course, standing open. Vivian was at her desk, surrounded by papers and laptop screens. She looked up when he knocked, and there were dark circles under her eyes that hadn't been there yesterday. Yes? Maya wanted to know if you'd like breakfast. I've already eaten. Dad made pancakes, Maya called from downstairs. Vivian's expression softened microscopically. That's kind, but please? Maya appeared at the bottom of the stairs, looking up with those eyes that could convince Ethan to do just about anything. We have syrup and everything. Vivian looked at Ethan. He shrugged, trying to convey this wasn't his idea. 10 minutes, Vivian said finally. Then I have work. Breakfast was awkward. Vivian sat at the end of the long dining table, maintaining careful distance. She picked at her food like someone going through motions rather than actually hungry. Maya chattered about school, about her new room, about the garden she could see from her window. Do you have a garden? Maya asked. With flowers? I do, Vivian said, though most things don't bloom this time of year. Can I help? In the spring, I'm really good at watering. We'll see. That means yes, Maya whispered to Ethan, loud enough for everyone to hear. Despite himself, Ethan almost laughed. Vivian's lips twitched again, that almost smile. Then there was a knock at the front door. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Vivian stood up so fast her chair scraped against the hardwood, and Ethan saw something flash across her face that looked a lot like fear. Stay here, she said. She walked to the front door. Ethan could see her from the dining room, and opened it to reveal a man in an expensive suit. He was probably 60, with silver hair and the kind of face that had learned to smile without using the eyes. The suit was tailored, the watch was gold, and everything about him screamed power and money and the confidence that came from never hearing the word no. Vivian. His voice was smooth as silk. I hope I'm not interrupting. You are. Vivian blocked the doorway. What do you want, Dean Sterling? Just checking on the property, making sure everything's in order. His eyes drifted past her into the house, landing on Ethan and Maya at the dining table. I see you've taken in boarders. How quaint. Tenants, and it's none of the university's concern. Everything regarding this property is the university's concern, my dear. You know that. Sterling's smile never wavered. I'll need to file a report, standard procedure. What are their names? That's confidential tenant information. Vivian, don't be difficult. Don't be invasive. Her voice was ice. You have no legal right to tenant information. The management agreement is clear on that. The management agreement is 40 years old and in desperate need of updating. Sterling pulled out a business card, trying to hand it to her. We should discuss this properly. Dinner, perhaps? I know a wonderful place. No. Vivian didn't take the card. And if you show up at my door again without an official university appointment, I'll file a harassment complaint. The smile finally cracked. You're making this much harder than it needs to be. Good. She started to close the door. That's the idea. Sterling's hand shot out, catching the door. This house is falling apart, Vivian. The foundation, the roof, the plumbing, it's all on borrowed time. The university could fix it, preserve it properly, but you're too stubborn to... Goodbye, Dean Sterling. She pushed the door closed and locked it, 2 deadbolts, 1 chain, then stood there for a moment with her hand pressed against the wood. When she turned around, Ethan saw that her hands were shaking. Who was that? Maya asked. No one important, Vivian said. But Ethan heard the lie in her voice. That night, after Maya was asleep, Ethan found Vivian in the library on the first floor. She was standing in front of the bookshelves, just staring at the spines like they held answers she couldn't find. Who is he? Ethan asked from the doorway. I told you, no one important. Vivian, Ms. Laurent. She turned to face him. We're not on a first-name basis, Mr. Cole. Fine. Mrs. Laurent, who is Dean Sterling and why does he want this house? She was quiet for a long moment. Then she walked to one of the leather chairs and sat down carefully, like every movement hurt. He's the university's Dean of Development, she said, which is a fancy way of saying he's in charge of acquiring and managing property for expansion. This house has been in my family for 140 years, but when my grandfather died, he made the mistake of putting it in a trust that gave the university partial oversight. The idea was to preserve it as historical property. What actually happened was it gave men like Sterling leverage. Leverage for what? To take it from me. Vivian's voice was flat. The trust agreement says I can manage the property independently as long as it's properly maintained. But properly maintained is subjective. Sterling's been trying for 5 years to prove I'm not fit to manage it. If he succeeds, the university can remove me and do whatever they want with the property. Like what? Tear it down. Build a new administrative building. Turn it into a museum where they control everything. She looked around the library. Erase my family's history and call it progress. Ethan sat down in the chair across from her. And the open door policy? Is how I prove transparency. Vivian met his eyes. Sterling accused me once of hiding property damage, of letting the house deteriorate in secret. He brought inspectors when I wasn't home, claimed I was deliberately keeping areas inaccessible. So now, everything is accessible. Everything is visible. No closed doors means no secrets means no ammunition for him to use against me. That's why you need tenants, Ethan said slowly. Not for the money, for witnesses, partially. She leaned back in her chair. The trust agreement requires the property be used for educational purposes. Providing affordable housing to university students qualifies. It also means I'm not living here alone, isolated, easy to paint as unstable or incapable. How many tenants have you had? You're the 4th in 3 years. What happened to the others? Vivian's smile was bitter. You were right earlier. I don't last a week with most people. They can't handle the rules, they can't handle me, or they can't handle Sterling showing up unannounced demanding to inspect their living quarters. The last tenant left after 2 days, called me a controlling psychopath. Are you? Ethan asked. A controlling psychopath? Some days I'm not sure. She looked at him. Does it bother you? The doors? Yes. Good. It should. It's invasive and uncomfortable and not how normal people live. She stood up. But this isn't a normal situation, Mr. Cole. This is survival. And if you can't handle that, there's the door, which will remain open whether you walk through it or not. She left him sitting there in the library, surrounded by books and the weight of a history he was just beginning to understand. By the end of the first week, they'd settled into an uncomfortable rhythm. Ethan dropped Maya at school, went to classes, came home and studied while his daughter did homework. Vivian worked in her third-floor study, coming down only for meals she usually ate alone. They crossed paths in hallways, shared bathrooms, existed in the same space without really connecting. But Ethan noticed things. He noticed that Vivian's limp got worse as the day went on. He noticed she ate like a bird, pushing food around her plate. He noticed that some mornings there were new papers spread across her desk. Legal documents, financial statements, letters from the university's administrative office. He noticed she never had visitors. He also noticed the house itself. The roof had a leak in the northeast corner that Vivian patched with buckets when it rained. The heating system was temperamental, cutting out at random. Several windows had broken seals, letting in drafts that made the second floor frigid at night. The foundation showed cracks in the basement that probably needed professional attention. She was drowning in this house. On Friday afternoon, Ethan came home from class to find Vivian on a ladder in the second-floor hallway, trying to change a light bulb in one of the old fixtures. She was shaking. "Get down," Ethan said. "I'm fine." "You're about to fall off that ladder. Get down." I said I'm fine. Her hand slipped. The ladder wobbled. Ethan moved without thinking, catching the ladder and steadying it until Vivian could grab the wall. "Jesus Christ," he breathed. "I had it under control. You could have broken your neck." "It's just a light bulb." Come down, please." Maybe it was the please that did it. Or maybe she was just tired. But Vivian climbed down the ladder slowly, and when she reached the floor, she was breathing hard. Ethan took the bulb from her hand. "Where do they go?" "You don't have to." Where do they go? She told him. He changed the bulb, checked the other fixtures in the hallway, and found two more that were close to burning out. Changed those too. The whole time, Vivian watched him with an expression he couldn't read. "Thank you," she said when he was done. It was the first time she'd said those words to him. "The heating's out in Maya's room," Ethan said, "and there's a draft coming from somewhere in the wall. Do you have someone who handles repairs?" "I handle repairs." "Vivian," he caught himself. "Ms. Laurent, you can't do everything yourself." "Watch me." But there was no conviction in her voice, just exhaustion. "Let me help," Ethan said. "I'm not a contractor, but I'm decent with basic repairs, and I owe you for the rent discount." "You owe me rent, not labor." "Consider it a bonus." He picked up the ladder. "Where does this go?" She stared at him for a long moment. Then, so quietly he almost missed it, basement. They worked on the heating together that evening, Ethan doing the physical labor while Vivian directed from a chair, consulting the house's original blueprints. The system was 90 years old and held together with hope and duct tape, but they got Maya's room warming again. "You're better at this than I expected," Vivian said as they packed up the tools. "My dad taught me, before he died." Ethan wiped his hands on a rag. "He said a man should know how to fix things. Never know when you might need it. Smart man." He was. They stood there in the basement, surrounded by old furniture and boxes of family history, and for the first time the silence between them felt less like a wall and more like a bridge. "There's a storm coming tomorrow," Vivian said. "Big one, according to the forecast. The northwest window in the library has been loose for months. If the wind hits it right, I'll reinforce it in the morning. You don't have to—" "I know." Ethan met her eyes. "But I'm going to anyway." Something shifted in her expression. Not quite trust, but maybe the beginning of it. "Okay," she said. They went back upstairs together, and Ethan noticed she didn't hide her limp quite as much. Progress, he thought. Small, hard-won, fragile progress. But progress nonetheless. The storm hit on Saturday like it had a personal grudge against the house. Ethan woke to the sound of wind screaming through the eaves and rain hammering the windows hard enough to crack glass. He checked his phone, 5:47 a.m., and seriously considered going back to sleep. Then he remembered the library window. He pulled on jeans and a sweatshirt and headed downstairs, moving quietly so he wouldn't wake Maya. The house groaned around him, old bones protesting the weather. Every open door created a wind tunnel, curtains whipping, papers scattering. He could hear something banging rhythmically on the second floor, a loose shutter maybe. The library was worse than he'd expected. The northwest window was rattling in its frame so violently it looked ready to explode. Rain was already seeping in around the edges, pooling on the hardwood floor. Ethan grabbed towels from the first-floor bathroom and started jamming them against the base of the window, but it was like trying to stop a flood with paper towels. He needed tools, boards, something to reinforce the frame before the whole thing gave way. "Basement," he muttered, and turned to find Vivian standing in the doorway. She was wearing pajama pants and an oversized sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders instead of pulled back. Without the armor of her usual business clothes, she looked younger and more terrified than Ethan had ever seen her. "How bad is it?" she asked. "Bad. I need to board it up from the outside." "You can't go out in this." "I can, and I will. Where do you keep plywood?" "There isn't any." Vivian crossed to the window, assessing the damage with the eye of someone who dealt with this house's problems for too long. "I have some old shelving in the basement. It might work." "Show me." They went down together, Vivian leading the way with a flashlight because the basement lights were flickering. The space smelled like damp earth and old wood. Water was dripping somewhere in the darkness, a steady plinking that suggested another leak. "There." Vivian pointed to a pile of wooden boards stacked against the far wall. "My grandfather's old workbench. I took it apart last year when the legs rotted out." Ethan grabbed the sturdiest pieces, testing their weight. Not ideal, but they'd do. "I need a hammer, nails, something waterproof to seal the edges." "I'll get them." She disappeared into the shadows and came back with a toolbox that looked like it had survived 2 world wars. Inside, a hammer with a cracked handle, a coffee can full of mismatched nails, and a roll of duct tape that had seen better days. "This is what you've been working with?" Ethan asked. It's gotten me this far. Jesus. He tucked the hammer into his waistband. Stay inside. I'll be back. Ethan. She caught his arm, and it was the first time she'd used his first name. Be careful. He went out through the side door into weather that felt like the end of the world. Rain hit him like fists. Wind tried to knock him sideways, and within seconds he was soaked through to the skin. The grass had turned to mud. The driveway was a river, and somewhere in the distance he heard the crack of a tree branch giving way. Getting to the window was harder than he'd anticipated. The hedges caught at his clothes, the ground tried to steal his boots, and halfway there he slipped and went down hard on one knee. Pain shot up his leg, but he kept moving because the alternative was letting that window explode and ruin everything inside. The boards were heavy, awkward to maneuver in the wind. He got the first one positioned against the frame and started hammering, but the nails were old and bent easily. Half of them he had to pull out and try again. His hands were numb, his vision blurred by rain, and the whole time he could hear the window groaning behind the wood. Then the glass cracked. Not shattered, not yet, but a spiderweb fracture appeared in the lower left pane, spreading like ice across a pond. Come on, Ethan growled, hammering faster. Come on, come on! The second board went up, then the third. He reinforced the edges with duct tape that immediately started peeling in the wind and didn't care because it was better than nothing. The rain kept coming, the wind kept screaming, and his fingers were so cold he could barely feel the hammer anymore. Finally, the window was covered. He stepped back, breathing hard, and watched to make sure it would hold. The boards rattled, but didn't move. The tape held. The glass behind it stayed intact. Good enough. He turned to head back inside and saw Vivian standing at the side door, holding it open against the wind. You're insane, she shouted over the storm. Probably. He staggered toward her, and she grabbed his arm and pulled him inside, slamming the door behind them. They stood in the mudroom, dripping on the tile, both breathing hard. Ethan's teeth were chattering. His clothes felt like they weighed 100 pounds. You could have been killed, Vivian said. The window's holding. That's not... She stopped, looking at him with an expression he couldn't parse. You're bleeding. He looked down. Sure enough, there was blood mixing with the rain on his hands, several cuts from handling the old boards, nothing serious but messy. First aid kit? He asked. Upstairs bathroom. I know where it is. He started to move past her, but she caught his wrist. Her fingers were warm against his frozen skin. Thank you, she said quietly. You already thanked me once this week. Careful, or I'll think you're getting soft. Don't push your luck, Mr. Cole. But she was almost smiling when she said it. Ethan went upstairs, peeled off his soaked clothes, and stood under a hot shower until feeling returned to his extremities. The cuts on his hands stung but weren't deep. Small price to pay for keeping the library intact. When he came out, in dry clothes, toweling his hair, he found Maya sitting on his bed in her pajamas, hugging her stuffed rabbit. Was it scary? She asked. A little. I heard the window making noise. It's okay now. I fixed it. She studied him with those two old eyes that kids develop when life hasn't been kind. You always fix things. I try. Mom never fixed things. She just left when they broke. Ethan sat down next to her, wrapping an arm around her small shoulders. Yeah, she did. Do you think we'll have to leave here too? The question hit him in the chest. Why would you think that? Because we always leave. We left our house, we left the motel, Hey! He turned her to face him. We're not leaving, okay? This is different. How? Because I'm not going to let us get pushed out again. We're staying. Maya leaned against him, and he felt the weight of every promise he'd made and broken over the past 2 years. Every time he'd said things would get better, and they hadn't. Every time he'd tried to build something stable and watched it collapse. But maybe this time could be different. Maybe. The storm raged all day. By noon, the power was out. By 2, water was leaking through the roof in 3 different places. Vivian produced buckets, towels, every container she could find, and they spread them throughout the house like some kind of disaster preparedness drill. This happened last year too, she said, positioning a bucket under a particularly aggressive drip in the second-floor hallway. And the year before. The roof needs to be replaced, but the cost... She stopped herself. It doesn't matter. I'll patch it again when the weather clears. You can't patch this forever, Ethan said. "Watch me." But there was no fight in her voice, just exhaustion. They spent the afternoon in the library, the one room that was still relatively dry, with Maya doing homework by flashlight while Ethan reviewed course materials and Vivian worked on her laptop until the battery died. The silence should have been awkward, but it wasn't. It was almost comfortable, three people existing in the same space without needing to fill it with conversation. Around 4, Maya looked up from her math worksheet. "Can we play a game?" "What kind of game?" Vivian asked. "I don't know. A talking game, 20 questions or something." "I don't think Miss Laurent wants to." "Actually," Vivian interrupted, 20 questions sounds fine." Maya beamed. "Okay, I go first. I'm thinking of an animal." They played for an hour, and Ethan watched Vivian slowly relax in a way he hadn't seen before. She smiled at Maya's increasingly absurd guesses, laughed when the answer turned out to be a penguin wearing a hat, and eventually started asking questions of her own. "My turn," Vivian said. "I'm thinking of a place." "Is it in America?" Maya asked. "No." "Is it in Europe?" "Yes." They went back and forth until Maya guessed Paris, and Vivian confirmed it with a smile that actually reached her eyes. "Have you been there?" Maya asked. "Once, a long time ago." "What was it like?" Vivian was quiet for a moment. "Beautiful. And lonely. I went alone, stayed alone, came home alone. I kept thinking I should have shared it with someone, but there was no one to share it with." The words hung in the air, more honest than anything she'd said before. "You could share it with us," Maya said simply, "if you went again." "That's very kind of you." "I'm serious. Dad says traveling is better with friends. We're not—" Vivian stopped herself. "That's a nice thought." Ethan saw something shift in her expression, some wall coming down just slightly. It was like watching ice begin to thaw. By evening, the storm had downgraded from apocalyptic to merely miserable. The power was still out, so they made sandwiches by candlelight in the kitchen. Vivian moved around her own kitchen like someone who rarely used it, opening cabinets uncertainly, checking expiration dates on mustard. "When's the last time you actually cooked here?" Ethan asked. "I don't cook." "Ever?" "I eat. That's different from cooking." "What do you eat?" "Salads, mostly. Takeout. Things that don't require effort." Ethan looked at her, really looked at her, and saw what he'd been missing. The thinness that wasn't genetics, the way her clothes hung loose, the exhaustion that came from running on empty for too long. "When's the last time you had a real meal?" he asked quietly. "I'm fine." "Vivian?" "Ms. Laurent." "Vivian." He didn't back down this time. "You're not fine, and I'm not going to pretend you are just because it makes you comfortable." Her jaw tightened. "This is exactly the kind of overstepping I warned you about." "Too bad. You're worried about this house falling apart, but you're falling apart faster. That's not your concern. It is when you collapse on the stairs at 2 in the morning, and I have to explain to my 7-year-old daughter why the lady who owns the house is unconscious in the hallway." The words came out harsher than he'd intended, but they needed to be said. Vivian stared at him, and he saw anger and embarrassment and something that might have been fear. "I don't need— saving?" "Yeah, I know. You've made that very clear." Ethan set down the knife he'd been using. "But here's the thing. I'm not offering to save you. I'm offering to help you eat a damn sandwich. If that's too much for your pride to handle, then I don't know what to tell you." Maya had gone very quiet, watching them both with wide eyes. Vivian looked at the sandwich in front of her, simple turkey and cheese on wheat bread, and Ethan saw her hand shake slightly as she picked it up. "Thank you," she said. She took a bite, then another. And Ethan realized she was actually hungry, had probably been hungry for a long time, and was just now letting herself admit it. They ate in silence, and it felt like some kind of victory. After dinner, Maya fell asleep on the library couch, curled up under a blanket Vivian had produced from somewhere. Ethan carried her upstairs to bed, tucking her in and listening to the rain that had finally softened to a steady patter. When he came back downstairs, Vivian was still in the library, sitting in one of the leather chairs with a candle burning on the side table. "She's a good kid," Vivian said. "She is. You're doing well with her, considering everything." Ethan sat down in the chair across from her. "I'm doing the best I can." Some days that feels like enough. Most days it doesn't. Her mother? Gone. Left 2 years ago for a guy she met at her gym. Signed away custody without a fight. He stared at the candle flame. Maya cried for 3 months straight. I had no idea what to do. I was working full-time, trying to finish my degree, suddenly a single parent with no roadmap. My marriage was over, my savings were gone, and my daughter was asking questions I didn't have answers for. How did you end up here? At the university? Deferred my admission twice already. Figured if I didn't go back now, I never would. Thought I could balance it. Work, school, parenting. He laughed without humor. Turns out I was wrong. Lost my job 6 months in because I kept missing shifts for Maya's school events. Couldn't afford rent, couldn't afford childcare, couldn't afford to quit because then what was the point of any of it? So you ended up at the Sunrise Inn. Glamorous, right? Ethan met her eyes. That first night you asked if I could afford to say no to your offer? The answer was no. I couldn't. Still can't. I need this to work, Vivian. Not just for me. For her. Vivian was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "The man who almost took this house from me? His name was Richard Calloway. I met him 7 years ago at a university function. He was charming, successful, interested in historical preservation. We dated for 6 months, and I thought..." She stopped, took a breath. "I thought I'd found someone who understood what this place meant to me." What happened? I gave him keys, let him stay here when I traveled for work, trusted him with everything. Her voice was flat, clinical. Turned out he was working with Dean Sterling the whole time. They had a plan. Richard would document any property damage, any maintenance issues, anything that could be used to prove I was an unfit property manager. He was taking photos, copying documents, building a case. They were going to petition the trust to remove me and give full control to the university. Jesus. I found out by accident. Came home early from a trip and heard him on the phone in the study, laughing about how easy it had been to gain my trust, talking about which rooms they'd convert first after I was gone. Vivian's hands were shaking again. Everything I'd shared with him, every vulnerable moment, every fear about losing this house, he'd been collecting it like evidence. How did you stop him? I recorded the conversation, confronted him, threatened to go public with what he'd done. She smiled bitterly. Richard disappeared fast. Sterling couldn't prove anything without his documentation, so the petition fell apart, but the damage was done. I'd trusted someone behind closed doors, and it nearly cost me everything. So you made the rule. So I made the rule. Vivian looked around the library. No more closed doors, no more secrets, no more trusting anyone with access I couldn't monitor. It was the only way I could feel safe here again. Ethan understood it now, all of it. The control wasn't about power. It was about survival, about a woman who'd been betrayed so thoroughly that transparency had become the only defense she had left. I'm not him, Ethan said quietly. I know you're not. Do you? Because sometimes I think you're waiting for me to prove you right. Waiting for me to be just another person who takes advantage. Maybe I am. Vivian met his eyes. Or maybe I'm terrified that you're different, and I don't know what to do with that. The honesty of it hit him square in the chest. They sat there in the candlelight, and Ethan felt something shift between them, some fundamental change in the architecture of their arrangement. For what it's worth, he said, I'm terrified too. Of screwing this up, of letting Maya down, of failing again. But I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere unless you tell me to leave. I won't. Promise? She smiled, a real smile this time, small and tentative but genuine. I promise. The candle burned lower, and outside the storm finally began to break. The next morning dawned clear and cold, the kind of November day that felt scrubbed clean. Ethan woke to sunlight streaming through his open door and the smell of coffee drifting up from downstairs. He found Vivian in the kitchen, actually cooking. Eggs, toast, bacon, a real breakfast. You said you don't cook, Ethan said. I said I don't usually cook. This morning felt different. They ate together, Ethan, Vivian, and Maya, and it felt almost normal, almost like a family, though none of them said that out loud. After breakfast, Ethan went outside to assess the storm damage. The yard was littered with branches, the garden was a mess, and the northwest window's makeshift boards were holding but looked rough in daylight. He was surveying the damage when a car pulled into the driveway. Dean Sterling stepped out, dressed in casual, expensive clothes that probably cost more than Ethan's car was worth. "Mr. Cole, isn't it?" Sterling extended a hand that Ethan didn't take. "We haven't been formally introduced. Dean Christopher Sterling." "I know who you are." "Excellent. Then you know I'm here in an official capacity to inspect the storm damage. Does Vivian know you're here?" "I'm sure she'll be delighted to see me." Sterling's smile was all teeth. "How are you finding your accommodations? Comfortable?" "Fine." "And Ms. Laurent's unique household rules? Not too invasive?" Ethan saw the trap being laid. Whatever he said would be used somehow. "My living arrangements are between me and my landlord," he said carefully. Of course. Though I have to say I'm concerned about the propriety of the situation. A single man living with an unmarried woman, a child in the house, all these open doors." Sterling let the implication hang in the air. "There's nothing improper happening here." "I'm sure there isn't. But appearances matter, don't they? Especially for someone in your position." Sterling's eyes glittered. "You're on scholarship, aren't you? Educational psychology program? I'd hate for any misunderstandings about your living situation to affect that." The threat was clear as glass. Before Ethan could respond, Vivian's voice cut through the morning air. "Dean Sterling, what a surprise." She was walking toward them across the lawn, dressed in slacks and a blazer like armor. Every inch the property manager, no trace of the woman who'd smiled over breakfast an hour ago. "Vivian, I was just introducing myself to your tenant." "I'm sure you were. Do you have an official inspection appointment I'm not aware of?" "After a storm like that? I thought I should check on the property immediately. You understand. I understand you're trespassing. The trust agreement requires 24 hours notice for non-emergency inspections. This is an emergency. That window," he pointed to the boarded-up library window, "that's clearly damaged. I need to document it." "The window is fine. Mr. Cole reinforced it during the storm." Sterling's eyebrows rose. "Your tenant is performing structural repairs? That's highly irregular. Do you have proper insurance for that? What if he'd been injured?" "He wasn't injured." "But he could have been. And then where would you be? Facing a lawsuit, possible criminal negligence charges?" "Get off my property," Vivian said quietly. "Vivian, be reasonable. Now!" They stared at each other, and Ethan saw something dangerous flash in Sterling's expression. "This house is falling apart," Sterling said. "The roof is leaking, the windows are failing, the foundation is cracking. You can't maintain it alone, and using untrained tenants to perform repairs is proof of that. I'll be filing a formal report with the trust board. File whatever you want, but do it from somewhere else." Sterling looked at Ethan. "You seem like a reasonable man, Mr. Cole. Perhaps we could have coffee sometime? Discuss your future at the university, your scholarship, your daughter's educational prospects?" The implication was clear. Cooperate with me, or everything you've built here disappears. "I don't think so," Ethan said. Sterling's smile vanished. He got back in his car and drove away without another word. When he was gone, Vivian's shoulders sagged. All the authority drained out of her posture, leaving someone who looked exhausted and frightened. "He's going to push harder now," she said. "Let him push. You don't understand. He has power at the university. He can try." Ethan moved closer. "But he can't make me leave unless you tell me to. Can he?" "No, the tenant agreements are private." "Then we're fine." "We're not fine." Vivian looked at him. "He's right about the house. It is falling apart. The repairs I need cost more than I have. Every month I fall further behind, and every month he gets closer to proving I can't manage this place." "How much?" Ethan asked. "What? How much do you need? For the roof, the windows, the foundation, all of it." 80,000, maybe more. She laughed bitterly. "I have a trust fund that should cover it, but the university controls the disbursements. They've been delaying every request for 2 years, requiring more documentation, more justifications. Sterling's been blocking the funding while simultaneously claiming I'm not maintaining the property. It's a perfect trap." Ethan thought about his scholarship, his meager savings, his complete lack of resources. Then he thought about Maya sleeping in her room with the window seat, about the first real stability they'd had in years, about this broken woman trying so hard to hold on to the only home she'd ever known. "There has to be another way," he said. "There isn't. I've looked at every option. Personal loans, grants, fundraising, nothing works fast enough." Vivian started walking back toward the house. It's only a matter of time before Sterling wins, and when he does, you and Maya will have to leave too. No. The word came out harder than he'd intended. She turned. No? No. We're not leaving, and neither are you. There's always another option. We just have to find it. Why do you care? Vivian asked, and there was something raw in her voice. This isn't your fight. You could walk away, find another place, and let this house become someone else's problem. Because I'm tired of walking away. Ethan closed the distance between them. Because my daughter finally has a home she loves. Because you're not the only one who's been fighting alone for too long. Ethan, because I think we could actually help each other if we stopped being too proud to admit we need it. Vivian stared at him, and he saw the exact moment she decided to trust him. It was subtle, a slight relaxation in her shoulders, a softening around her eyes, but it was there. Okay, she said quietly. Help me find another option. They spent the rest of Sunday afternoon spread out in the library, going through every document related to the house and the trust. Ethan read while Vivian explained, untangling years of legal language and university bureaucracy. The more he learned, the angrier he got. The trust had been established by Vivian's grandfather with good intentions: preserve the house, keep it in the family, ensure it served educational purposes. But the agreement had loopholes big enough to drive a truck through. The university had veto power over major expenses. They could demand inspections. They could challenge the property manager's competency based on subjective criteria. And they'd been using every one of those powers to slowly strangle Vivian's control. This clause here, Ethan said, pointing to a section on page 12, it says the property manager can request emergency funds for critical repairs. Have you used that? 3 times. They denied all 3 requests. On what grounds? Insufficient documentation. They wanted engineering reports, contractor estimates, proof of emergency status, all of which cost money I don't have. Ethan sat back, thinking. There had to be an angle, some way to work the system instead of fighting it head on. What if we give them exactly what they're asking for? He said slowly. I just told you, I can't afford. What if you could? What if we documented everything ourselves? I'm not an engineer. No, but I know people who are. Graduate students need practical experience for their programs. What if we brought in students from the engineering department to assess the house? They get hands-on experience. You get professional documentation. Free. Vivian blinked. Would they actually do that? Probably, if we frame it as a learning opportunity. Ethan was thinking faster now, pieces falling into place. And for contractor estimates, there's a community service requirement in my program. What if I make this my project? Interview contractors, compile estimates, create a comprehensive repair plan. It's educational for me, and it gives you the documentation you need. That's still months of work, so we work fast. We get everything done before the next trust board meeting, dump it on their desk, and demand the funding they can't legally deny if all the requirements are met. Sterling will fight it. Let him. He can't argue with objective data from university students and licensed contractors. Vivian looked at the documents spread across the table, then back at Ethan. You'd really do this? Take on all that extra work for a house that isn't yours? It's not for the house, Ethan said. It's for Maya, for you, for all of us. She was quiet for a long time. Then she reached across the table and took his hand, the first time she'd initiated physical contact. Thank you, she said, and this time, Ethan believed she meant it. They started the next day. Ethan spent Monday morning making calls between classes, reaching out to every contact he could think of in the engineering department. By afternoon, he had 3 graduate students interested in using the house as a case study for their structural assessment course. By evening, they'd scheduled the first walkthrough for Wednesday. Tuesday, he contacted contractors. Most weren't interested in providing free estimates, but a few agreed when he explained it was for a university historical preservation project. Not charity, just good PR for their businesses. Wednesday, the engineering students arrived. There were 3 of them, 2 guys and a woman, all in their mid-20s and desperately excited to get their hands on a real project. They swarmed through the house with clipboards and measuring tools, documenting every crack, every leak, every structural concern. Vivian followed them around with a mixture of anxiety and hope. The foundation is worse than I thought, one of the students said. showing Vivian photos he'd taken in the basement. See these cracks? They're not just cosmetic. You've got water damage, possible settling issues. This needs professional attention soon. How soon? Vivian asked. Depends on how fast you want the house to fall into the basement. Not the answer she wanted to hear. But by the end of this week, they had documentation. Pages and pages of it. Professional assessments, detailed photos, engineering calculations, everything the trust could possibly ask for. Ethan compiled it into a report that would have made his professors proud. Clear, comprehensive, impossible to dismiss as hysterical exaggeration. Friday evening, they sat in the library reviewing the final document. "This is good," Vivian said. "Really good. It's thorough. It's more than thorough. It's airtight." She looked at him. "How did you learn to do this?" "My thesis advisor is a stickler for documentation. I've had 2 years of training in how to build an irrefutable argument." "Well, it shows," Vivian closed the report. "We submit this to the trust board next week, along with a formal funding request for $83,000. 83. The students found additional issues I didn't know about. The electrical system is outdated, there's asbestos in the attic, and the chimney is one strong wind away from collapsing." Ethan whistled. "Okay, 83,000. They're going to fight this." "Probably, but at least now we're fighting with ammunition." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, and Ethan realized how much had changed in 3 weeks. The woman sitting across from him wasn't the cold, controlling property manager who'd blocked the doorway that first day. She was someone scared and strong and fighting like hell to protect what mattered. He was starting to understand why. "Can I ask you something?" Vivian said. "Sure. Why didn't you ever close the doors, even when I wasn't watching?" Ethan thought about it. "Honestly? At first it was because I needed to follow the rules, but somewhere along the way, I realized you weren't checking up on me. You were just trying to feel safe. And if an open door makes you feel safe, that's a small price to pay for a home. Most people wouldn't see it that way. Most people haven't been where I've been. When you've got nothing, you learn to appreciate what you do have, even if it comes with weird conditions." Vivian smiled. "Is that what I am? A weird condition?" "The weirdest." But he was smiling too. Maya appeared in the doorway, already in her pajamas. "Can I have hot chocolate?" she asked. "It's almost bedtime," Ethan said. "Please, just a little one?" Vivian stood. "I'll make it." "You want one too, Ethan?" It was the first time she'd offered to make him anything. "Yeah," he said. "That sounds good." They went to the kitchen together, all 3 of them, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world. The hot chocolate was mediocre. Vivian admitted she'd never made it before and probably used too much powder, but Maya drank it like it was the best thing she'd ever tasted. "This is nice," she said, swinging her legs from the kitchen chair. "All of us together." "It is," Vivian agreed. "Are we friends now?" The question was directed at Vivian, who seemed caught off guard. She looked at Ethan, then back at Maya. "Yes, I think we are." "Good." Maya finished her chocolate and hopped down. "Friends are important. Dad says so." She hugged Vivian, quick and unself-conscious, and then ran upstairs to brush her teeth. Vivian stood very still, like she didn't know what to do with the gesture. "She likes you," Ethan said. "I haven't done anything to earn that. You gave us a home. That's enough." Vivian looked at him, and something passed between them, some understanding that went beyond words. They were building something here, the 3 of them. Something fragile and important and worth protecting, even if neither of them was ready to name it yet. That night, Ethan lay in bed and thought about progress. About how 3 weeks ago he'd been desperate and homeless, and now he was lying in a real bedroom in a house that felt more like home than anywhere he'd lived in years. He thought about Vivian upstairs, probably still working on trust documents and funding requests. He thought about Maya sleeping peacefully down the hall. And he thought about Dean Sterling, circling like a shark, waiting for them to make a mistake. The fight wasn't over. But for the first time in a long time, Ethan felt like maybe, just maybe, they could win. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk about your living situation. This is Dean Sterling. Call me at your earliest convenience." Ethan deleted the message and rolled over. Some conversations could wait until morning, or never. He was just drifting off when he heard it. Footsteps in the hall, slow, uneven. Vivian. He sat up, listening. She stopped outside his door, which was standing open, and he heard her breathing, ragged and pained. Vivian, he called quietly. I'm fine. But her voice was wrong. Ethan got out of bed and found her leaning against the doorframe, one hand pressed to her side, face pale in the darkness. What's wrong? Nothing, just... She winced. Old injury acting up. The same one from before? It's fine. It's not fine. He guided her to sit on the edge of his bed. What hurts? Ribs, left side. I broke 3 of them 5 years ago and they never healed quite right. Sometimes when I overdo it, you need to see a doctor. I've seen doctors. They can't do anything except tell me to rest and take painkillers. She tried to stand, which I can do in my own room. Stay here a minute. He went to the bathroom, got ibuprofen and water, came back to find her still sitting there with her eyes closed. Take these, he said. She did, swallowing the pills with shaking hands. How bad is it? Ethan asked. Bad enough. Can I do anything? You already are. She opened her eyes, looking at him. You're here. That's more than most people would be. They sat in silence, and Ethan became acutely aware that he was in his t-shirt and pajama pants, and she was in his room, and the intimacy of the moment was something neither of them had planned for. I should go, Vivian said. You should rest. Ethan, 5 minutes. Just sit here until the painkillers kick in. Then you can go back to being independent and difficult. She almost laughed. I'm not difficult. You're impossible. There's a difference. Fair enough. They sat there in the darkness of his room with the door standing open, and somewhere in the quiet, something between them shifted again. Not romance. Not yet. But the beginning of something that could be if they were both brave enough to let it. The painkillers took longer than 5 minutes to work, but Ethan didn't mention it. Vivian sat on the edge of his bed for nearly 20 minutes, breathing carefully, and he pretended not to notice the way she kept pressing her hand against her ribs like she could will the pain away through sheer stubbornness. Better? He finally asked. Getting there. She stood slowly, testing her weight. Thank you. You don't have to keep thanking me. I know. But I'm going to anyway. She paused in the doorway. Ethan, that text from Sterling, don't respond to it. Don't engage with him at all unless I'm there. How did you? I saw your phone light up when you set it down. I know his number. Her expression hardened. He's trying to isolate you, get you alone so he can make offers or threats without witnesses. Don't give him that opportunity. I wasn't planning to. Good. She looked at him for a moment longer, something unreadable in her eyes. Good night. Night. She disappeared up the stairs, and Ethan heard her moving around on the 3rd floor for another hour before the house finally went quiet. He didn't sleep well. Kept thinking about broken ribs that never healed right, about pain someone had been carrying alone for 5 years, about the way Vivian's hands had shaken when she'd taken those pills. Morning came gray and cold, the first real hint that winter was closing in. Ethan made coffee and found Vivian already in the kitchen, dressed in another of her armor-like outfits, black slacks, cream blouse, hair pulled back so tight it had to hurt. You're up early, he said. Trust board meeting is this afternoon. I need to prepare. You want company? She looked surprised. You don't have class. Not until 3. I could sit in, take notes, back you up if Sterling tries anything. This isn't your fight. We've already had this conversation. Yes, it is. Ethan poured 2 cups of coffee, handed her one. Besides, you said it yourself. He's circling. Better to show a united front. Vivian studied him over the rim of her cup. You realize being publicly associated with me could hurt your reputation at the university? Sterling has influence in the graduate programs. If he thinks you're working against him, then he thinks I'm working against him. I'm okay with that. You shouldn't be. You have too much to lose. So do you. Ethan leaned against the counter. Look, I get that you're used to handling everything alone, but that's not working anymore, is it? Sterling keeps pushing because he knows you're isolated. So let's change that. Let him see that you've got someone backing you up. It could make things worse, or it could make things better. Only one way to find out. Vivian was quiet for a long moment, and Ethan could see her running calculations, weighing risks. Finally, she nodded. Okay, but if this goes sideways, I want you to walk away. Don't let him drag you down with me. Not happening. Ethan, not happening. He met her eyes. We're in this together now. Deal with it. She almost smiled. You're incredibly stubborn. Learn from the best. The trust board meeting was held in a conference room in the university's oldest administrative building, all dark wood paneling and portraits of dead white men who'd probably never done a useful thing in their lives. There were 5 board members, all sitting on one side of a long table like judges at a trial. Dean Sterling sat at the far end, looking smug. Vivian sat across from them with her spine straight and her hands folded. Ethan took the chair beside her, and he saw Sterling's eyes narrow when he walked in. Ms. Laurent, the board chair said, an older woman with reading glasses on a chain. We've received your funding request, $83,000 for property repairs. That's correct. Vivian slid copies of Ethan's report across the table. You'll find complete documentation of all necessary repairs, including engineering assessments from graduate students in your own structural engineering program, contractor estimates from licensed professionals, and a detailed breakdown of costs. The board members began flipping through the report. Sterling hadn't touched his copy. This is quite comprehensive, Butts, another board member said, a younger man in an expensive suit. When did you compile this? Over the past 2 weeks. 2 weeks? This level of documentation typically takes months. I had help. Vivian glanced at Ethan. Mr. Cole is a graduate student in educational psychology. He organized the engineering assessments and coordinated with contractors as part of his community service requirement. Sterling finally spoke. How convenient. Your tenant just happens to produce exactly the documentation you need, exactly when you need it. I fail to see the problem, Vivian said coolly. You've been demanding proper documentation for 2 years. Now you have it. The problem is conflict of interest. Mr. Cole lives in the property. He has a vested interest in ensuring funding is approved, so his rent remains affordable. Mr. Cole coordinated assessments performed by independent third parties. He didn't conduct them himself. Still, the appearance of impropriety— There is no impropriety, Ethan interrupted. Everything in that report is factual and verifiable. If you doubt the engineering assessments, feel free to bring in your own engineers to confirm them. If you doubt the contractor estimates, call the contractors yourself. But don't dismiss legitimate documentation just because you don't like who compiled it. The room went very quiet. Sterling's face darkened. Mr. Cole, the board chair said carefully, you're not actually part of this meeting. Then why did you let me sit here? As Ms. Laurent's guest, but you don't have speaking privileges. He can speak, Vivian said. I'm authorizing it. This meeting concerns the property where he lives. He has a right to be heard. Sterling leaned forward. This is highly irregular. So is delaying funding requests for 2 years while simultaneously claiming the property is poorly maintained, Vivian shot back. We can discuss irregular procedures all day if you'd like. The board chair cleared her throat. Let's stay focused. Ms. Laurent, even with this documentation, $83,000 is a substantial sum. The trust's available funds are more than adequate, Vivian interrupted. The trust has over $2 million in liquid assets. I'm requesting 4%. That's well within normal disbursement parameters. Nevertheless, repairs of this magnitude require careful consideration. How much more consideration do you need? I've provided everything you've asked for. Engineering reports, contractor estimates, emergency status documentation. What else do you want? Time, Sterling said smoothly. These decisions can't be rushed. I propose we table this request until the next quarterly meeting so the board can properly review. No. Vivian's voice was steel. No more delays. The foundation is actively deteriorating. The roof leaks every time it rains. The electrical system is a fire hazard. Every day you delay puts the property at greater risk. Then perhaps, Sterling said, the property is beyond your ability to manage. Perhaps it's time to consider alternative arrangements. There it was. The real agenda, laid bare. Alternative arrangements like what? Ethan asked. Removing Ms. Laurent and giving you full control? That's not what I said. It's what you meant. Sterling's jaw tightened. Mr. Cole, you're a graduate student living in subsidized housing. I'd be very careful about making accusations against university officials if I were you. Is that a threat? It's a reminder that your position here is precarious. Dean Sterling, the board chair cut in. That's inappropriate. I'm simply stating facts. Mr. Cole is on partial scholarship. His academic standing requires maintaining good relationships with faculty and administration. Antagonizing the Dean of Development seems unwise. Ethan felt anger rising in his chest, hot and sharp. But before he could respond, Vivian's hand found his under the table. A quick squeeze, a silent message to let her handle this. Dean Sterling, she said, her voice dangerously calm, if you threaten my tenant again, I will file a formal complaint with the university president. Are we clear? I'm not threatening anyone. I'm offering friendly advice. Your advice is noted and dismissed. Now, can we return to the actual topic of this meeting? The board chair looked uncomfortable. Ms. Laurent, I understand your urgency, but the board needs time to review this documentation properly. However, I'm prepared to authorize emergency funding for the most critical repairs, the foundation and the roof. Call it $30,000 to start. That's less than half of what's needed. It's what I can authorize today without a full board vote. The rest will require the quarterly meeting, which is 3 months away. I'm sorry, but that's the best I can offer. Vivian looked at the report, at the board members, at Sterling's satisfied expression. Ethan could see her running calculations again, weighing incomplete victory against total defeat. Fine, she said finally. $30,000 for foundation and roof, but I want it in writing, and I want the funds transferred within 2 weeks. Agreed. I'll have the paperwork drawn up by Friday. The meeting ended shortly after that. Ethan and Vivian walked out into the cold November air, and neither of them spoke until they were back at the car. $30,000, Vivian said flatly. It's not enough. But it's something. It keeps the house standing while we figure out the rest. Sterling won't let this go. You heard him. He's already targeting you now. Let him target me. I can handle it. Vivian turned to face him. You don't understand what he's capable of. He's destroyed careers, tanked scholarships, made people disappear from university programs with a few well-placed words. If he decides you're an obstacle, then I'm an obstacle. Vivian, I knew what I was getting into when I walked into that meeting. I made my choice. Why? The question came out almost desperate. Why would you risk everything for a house that isn't yours and a fight that shouldn't be your problem? Ethan thought about how to answer that. About Maya sleeping peacefully in her room with the window seat, about breakfast in the kitchen that felt like family, about a woman who'd been fighting alone for so long she'd forgotten what it felt like to have someone stand beside her. Because somebody has to, he said finally, and it might as well be me. They drove home in silence, but it wasn't the uncomfortable kind anymore. It was the silence of two people who'd just crossed a line together and were trying to figure out what came next. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. The emergency funding came through, barely, and Vivian hired contractors to work on the foundation and roof. The house became a construction zone, full of workers and noise and the constant smell of wet concrete and roofing tar. Ethan kept up with his classes, helped Maya with homework, and tried to ignore the way other graduate students had started giving him odd looks in the hallways. Word had spread somehow about his involvement with Vivian's trust board meeting, and rumors were flying. Some people thought he was sleeping with her for cheap rent. Others thought he was trying to manipulate an older woman for financial gain. A few believed he was genuinely trying to help, but they were in the minority. Sterling's influence was working its poison through the university's social networks. Ethan ignored it until he couldn't anymore. It was late October when his academic advisor called him in for a meeting. Dr. Patricia Chen was usually warm and supportive, but today she looked worried. Ethan, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Okay. Are you living at the Laurent estate? He'd known this was coming, but it still felt like a trap. Yes. And you're involved in the property's management somehow? There's a report going around that you attended a trust board meeting. I compiled documentation for a funding request as part of my community service requirement. Community service is supposed to involve working with educational programs or nonprofits, not private property management. The Laurent estate is part of the university's historical trust. It serves educational purposes by providing affordable housing to students. That seems like legitimate community service to me. Dr. Chen sighed. Ethan, I'm not trying to attack you. I'm trying to help you understand that there are people asking questions. Important people. People like Dean Sterling? I can't comment on that. Comment on, which means yes. Ethan leaned forward. Dr. Chen, I'm doing good work. My grades are solid, my thesis is on track, and everything I've done regarding the Laurent property has been above board. If someone has a specific complaint, I'm happy to address it, but I'm not going to apologize for helping someone who needed help. Even if it costs you your scholarship? The words hit like a punch to the gut. Is that a real threat or a hypothetical? It's a warning. The scholarship committee meets in 3 weeks to review all current recipients. Your file will be among them. If there are questions about your conduct or judgment, my conduct is fine, my judgment is sound. And if the committee has concerns, they can speak to me directly instead of sending messages through my advisor. Dr. Chen looked pained. I'm on your side, Ethan, but I can't protect you from politics I'm not part of. Just be careful. Think about what you're risking. He thought about it all the way home. Thought about his scholarship, his degree, his entire future hanging in the balance because he'd chosen to help someone Sterling wanted destroyed. Thought about whether it was worth it. Then he walked into the house and found Maya and Vivian in the kitchen, baking cookies together. Vivian had flour on her nose, Maya was laughing, and the whole scene was so domestic and normal that it made Ethan's chest ache. Dad, Maya called, look, Vivian's teaching me how to make snickerdoodles. I'm attempting to teach her, Vivian corrected. The jury's still out on whether I actually know what I'm doing. They smell amazing, Ethan said. They're probably terrible, but Maya insisted we try. Because you said you never bake, and everyone should know how to bake at least one thing. Maya carefully placed another misshapen cookie on the baking sheet. These are your one thing. Vivian caught Ethan's eye, and he saw something there he hadn't seen before. Contentment. Maybe even happiness. Like for the first time in years, she was letting herself enjoy a simple moment without waiting for it to be ruined. And Ethan knew his answer. It was worth it. All of it. The university's annual autumn gala was scheduled for the first Saturday in November. It was one of those events nobody actually wanted to attend, but everyone had to. A networking opportunity disguised as a party, where faculty and administration mingled with donors and tried to look like they enjoyed each other's company. Ethan had never gone before. Couldn't afford the ticket, didn't have the right clothes, didn't see the point. But this year, Vivian had an invitation. And this year, she asked if he wanted to come with her. Why would you want me there? Ethan asked. They were sitting in the library on a Thursday evening, Vivian working on trust documents while Ethan graded papers for the undergraduate class he TA'd for. Because Sterling will be there, Vivian said without looking up from her laptop. And I'm tired of dealing with him alone. Also, there will be donors who support historical preservation. I want to talk to them about alternative funding sources, and having someone there who can speak intelligently about the house's condition would help. I don't have anything to wear to a gala. I'll handle that. Vivian, it's not charity. Consider it a work expense. You're helping me network. This is the appropriate attire for that work. She finally looked up. Unless you don't want to go? I didn't say that. Then it's settled. 2 days later, a suit appeared in Ethan's room. Charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, with a shirt and tie that probably cost more than his monthly rent. There was a note pinned to the jacket. This should fit. If it doesn't, there's a tailor 3 blocks east who can adjust it. Bill me. V. The suit fit perfectly. Saturday evening, Ethan stood in front of the mirror trying to remember the last time he'd looked this put together. Before the divorce, probably. Before everything fell apart. Maya appeared in his doorway, eyes wide. Dad, you look fancy. Is that good or bad? Good. You look like a prince or something. I don't know about that. You do. She came closer, straightening his tie even though it was already straight. Is Vivian going to the party too? Yeah, we're going together. Like a date? Not a date, a work thing. But you're wearing fancy clothes and going to a party together. That sounds like a date. It's complicated. Adults always say that when they don't want to explain. Maya grinned. I think it's a date. Before Ethan could argue, he heard footsteps on the stairs. Vivian descended from the 3rd floor, and Ethan forgot how to breathe. She was wearing a dress, deep blue, elegant without being flashy, with a neckline that was perfectly appropriate while still making it impossible to look away. Her hair was down for once, falling in waves past her shoulders. She'd done something different with her makeup that made her eyes look impossibly large. She looked beautiful, devastating, dangerous. "Wow," Maya said. "You look like a princess." Vivian smiled. "Thank you, Maya. You look lovely too. I'm in my pajamas." "Lovely pajamas." Maya giggled and Ethan finally found his voice. "You look incredible." "You clean up well yourself." Vivian's eyes traveled over him, and something flickered in her expression. "The suit fits." "Perfectly, thank you." They stood there looking at each other, and Ethan was acutely aware of Maya watching them with the knowing expression only 7-year-olds could manage. "You should probably go before you're late," Maya said. "Mrs. Chen is coming to babysit in 10 minutes. Mrs. Chen was their elderly neighbor who Maya adored. Ethan had arranged it 3 days ago, which now felt like planning for a date, even though this definitely wasn't a date. "Right," Ethan said. "We should go." The gala was being held in the university's grand ballroom, which had been decorated within an inch of its life. String lights, fall flowers, tables covered in white linens. A bar in one corner, a small orchestra in another. Faculty and donors milling around in expensive clothes, drinking wine and making small talk. Ethan felt immediately out of place. But Vivian moved through the crowd like she'd been born to it, shaking hands, making introductions, chatting easily with people who probably had more money than Ethan would see in his lifetime. She kept one hand on his arm, guiding him through conversations, including him in discussions about property preservation and historical trusts. "This is Ethan Cole," she'd say. "He's been instrumental in documenting the estate's repair needs. His organizational work has been invaluable." People would nod politely, ask a few questions, and Ethan would answer with the same professional competence he used in academic settings. It wasn't as hard as he'd expected. These were just people, after all. Rich people with influence, sure, but still just people. Then Sterling appeared. "Vivian?" He materialized beside them with a wine glass in hand and that politician's smile firmly in place. "How lovely to see you. And Mr. Cole. What a surprise." "Dean Sterling." Vivian's voice could have frozen water. "Enjoying the party?" "Immensely. Though I'm surprised to see you here together. Attending as colleagues? Or is this something more, personal?" The implication was clear as glass. "We're here to discuss property preservation with potential donors," Vivian said, "which is entirely professional." "Of course. Though you have to admit the optics are interesting. A single woman, a male tenant half her age arriving together at a social function." Sterling sipped his wine. "People do talk. Let them talk. Some talk is harmless, some can be damaging, especially when it involves questions of propriety regarding university property." Ethan felt his hands clench. "Are you suggesting something inappropriate is happening?" "I'm simply noting how things might appear to others. Then others need better things to do with their time." Sterling's smile sharpened. "Careful, Mr. Cole. Rudeness to university officials rarely ends well for graduate students. Neither does harassment of university property managers." "Ethan," Vivian said quietly. A warning. But Sterling was looking at him now with undisguised hostility. "You're a single father on scholarship, living in subsidized housing, one bad semester away from losing everything. And you're choosing to make an enemy of me? That's remarkably foolish." "Or remarkably brave," said a new voice. They all turned to find a woman in her 60s standing behind them, elegant, sharp-eyed, wearing pearls that probably cost more than Ethan's car. "Dr. Morrison," Sterling said, and his tone had changed completely. "I didn't see you there." "Clearly." Dr. Morrison looked at Vivian. "Ms. Laurent, isn't it? I knew your grandfather. Good man. Terrible poker player, but good man." "Thank you. He spoke highly of you." "I doubt that. We disagreed on everything." Dr. Morrison turned to Ethan. "And you're the young man who compiled that remarkable property assessment report. I sit on the trust board. Very impressed with your work." "Thank you," Ethan managed. "Dean Sterling here seems to think you're operating from ulterior motives. I think you're operating from competence, which is refreshing, frankly. Too many people around here confuse activity with accomplishment." She smiled at Sterling. "Present company included." Sterling's face went red. "Dr. Morrison, I don't think—" "No, you generally don't. That's part of the problem." She linked her arm through Vivian's. "Ms. Laurent, I'd like to discuss your property's historical significance. There are preservation grants you might qualify for that would bypass the university's funding delays entirely. Shall we talk? I'd love that. Dr. Morrison led Vivian away, leaving Ethan and Sterling alone. They looked at each other, and Sterling's mask finally dropped completely. What was underneath was cold and calculating and mean. "You're making a mistake," Sterling said quietly, "aligning yourself with her, embarrassing me in front of donors. You're writing your own exit from this university. I'm helping someone who needs help. If that threatens you, that says more about you than it does about me. You think you're noble? You're just another opportunist trying to use a vulnerable woman for your own gain. She's not vulnerable. She's strong. Stronger than you'll ever be." "She's broken," Sterling hissed. "Damaged. Unstable. And when this all falls apart, when she loses that house and you lose your scholarship, don't say you weren't warned." He walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Ethan stood there shaking with anger and adrenaline and realized his hands were clenched so tight his nails were cutting into his palms. That looked intense. He turned to find Vivian beside him again, Dr. Morrison gone. "What did he say?" she asked. "Nothing worth repeating." "Ethan. He thinks I'm using you, thinks you're unstable, thinks we're both going to crash and burn, and he'll be there to watch it happen." The words came out bitter. Standard Sterling manipulation. Vivian's jaw tightened. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have brought you here. I should have known he'd—" "Don't!" Ethan caught her hand. "Don't apologize for him being an asshole. And don't apologize for asking me to come with you. I wanted to be here." "Even now?" "Especially now." They stood there in the middle of the ballroom, holding hands, and Ethan became aware that people were watching them, whispering behind wine glasses, drawing conclusions that might or might not be accurate. "We should probably let go," Vivian said softly. "Probably?" Neither of them moved. Then the orchestra started playing something slow and romantic, and couples began moving toward the dance floor. "Dance with me," Vivian said. "I don't really know how—" "Neither do I. We'll figure it out." She led him onto the floor, and Ethan put one hand on her waist while she placed hers on his shoulder. They moved in an approximation of a waltz, slightly offbeat, definitely not graceful. "I'm stepping on your feet," Ethan said. "I don't care. People are staring. Let them." They turned slowly, and Ethan was aware of everything. The warmth of her hand in his, the way she smelled like expensive perfume, and something underneath that was just her. The fact that she was exactly the right height for him to rest his chin on her head if he wanted to. "Thank you for tonight," Vivian said. "You already thanked me. I'm thanking you again for standing up to Sterling, for being here, for—" She paused. "For not running when things got complicated. Where would I run to?" "Anywhere. Away from me. Away from this mess." She looked up at him, and her eyes were impossibly green. "Most people do." "I'm not most people." "No, you're really not." They kept dancing, and something shifted in the air between them. Some unspoken thing that had been building for weeks, maybe longer. Ethan could feel it in the way she was looking at him, in the way his heart was racing, in the way the whole ballroom seemed to fade until it was just the two of them. "Vivian," he said quietly. "Yeah?" "We should probably talk about what's happening here." "What is happening here?" "I don't know, but it feels like something." She smiled, soft and uncertain. "It does, doesn't it?" The song ended. They stopped moving but didn't let go of each other. And Ethan realized with perfect clarity that he was in serious trouble. Because somewhere between open doors and storm windows and trust board meetings, he'd started falling for his landlord. And from the way she was looking at him, he was pretty sure she was falling too. "Come on," Vivian said, taking his hand. "Let's get out of here." They left the ballroom together, stepping out into the cold November night. It had started to rain, light, misty, the kind that hung in the air like fog. "We could go back to the house," Ethan said, "or we could walk for a bit." "In the rain?" "Why not? We're already here, we're already dressed up. Might as well ruin these expensive clothes properly." Ethan laughed, and they started walking through campus hand in hand, rain slowly soaking through their formal wear. It was ridiculous and impractical and absolutely perfect. They ended up on a covered balcony overlooking the quad, an old stone structure that probably dated back to the university's founding. The rain was coming down harder now, pattering on the roof above them. I have to tell you something, Vivian said. Okay, and I need you to let me finish before you respond. That sounded ominous. All right. She turned to face him fully, rain dripping from her hair, makeup slightly smudged. I haven't let myself care about anyone in 5 years. Not really. After Richard, after everything that happened, I convinced myself it was safer to be alone. Safer to keep everyone at arm's length. To never trust anyone with anything that mattered. Vivian, let me finish. She took a breath. But then you showed up, desperate and proud and trying so hard to take care of your daughter while everything was falling apart. And you followed my ridiculous rules without complaint. And you fixed my windows and compiled my reports and stood up to Sterling even when it would have been smarter to walk away. And somewhere in all of that, I started to trust you, which terrifies me. Why? Because trusting people hasn't worked out well for me. Because I don't know how to do this without all my armor. Because, her voice cracked, because if I let you in and you leave, I don't think I'll survive it. Ethan stepped closer until they were barely a foot apart. I'm not leaving. You don't know that. People always leave. Then I'll be the first one who stays. He reached up, brushing rain from her cheek. Vivian, I'm not Richard. I'm not Sterling. I'm just a guy trying to build a life for his daughter. And somewhere along the way, I realized that life looks a lot better with you in it. Ethan, I'm falling for you. Have been for weeks, probably. And I know the timing is terrible and the circumstances are complicated. And there are about 100 reasons why this is a bad idea. But I don't care. Because when I'm with you, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Vivian stared at him, and he could see her fighting some internal battle. Fear versus hope. Control versus surrender. I'm broken, she whispered. You need to know that. I have chronic pain. I have trust issues. I have a house that's literally falling apart. And a man trying to destroy my life. I'm not some prize worth fighting for. You're wrong. Ethan moved closer still. You're strong and brilliant, and you've been fighting alone for so long, you've forgotten what it's like to have someone on your side. But I'm on your side, Vivian, whether you want me there or not. I want you there. The words came out small and fierce. That's what scares me. They stood there in the rain-soaked darkness, and Ethan could feel the moment stretching between them like a held breath. Then Vivian kissed him. It was tentative at first, testing, questioning, like she wasn't sure if this was allowed. But Ethan kissed her back, and tentative became certain, became desperate. His hands found her waist, hers tangled in his hair, and everything else disappeared except the taste of her mouth and the sound of rain and the feeling that something fundamental had just shifted in his world. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Vivian laughed, surprised and delighted and a little bit scared. We just did that, she said. Yeah. In public. On a balcony in the rain during a university gala. Sterling's going to have a field day with this. Probably. Ethan kissed her again, softer this time. Worth it, though. She smiled against his mouth. Definitely worth it. They stayed on that balcony until the rain stopped, talking and kissing and mapping out the new territory they'd just entered. And when they finally headed back to the car, Ethan felt like he was walking on air. The happiness lasted exactly until Monday morning when the photo appeared. Someone had taken a picture of them on the balcony, Ethan and Vivian kissing, clearly recognizable despite the rain and darkness. The photo had been posted to the university's gossip forum overnight, and by morning it had spread everywhere. The caption was brutal. Professor Laurent gets cozy with her much younger tenant. Conflict of interest or just plain inappropriate? Ethan's phone started buzzing before he even got to campus. Texts from classmates, emails from concerned friends, a voicemail from Dr. Chen asking him to come to her office immediately. He found Vivian in the kitchen, staring at her laptop with an expression of pure horror. You've seen it, he said. Everyone's seen it. She looked up at him. Ethan, I'm so sorry. I should have been more careful. I should have known someone might. Don't. This isn't your fault. It is. I'm the one with enemies. I'm the one Sterling's been waiting to catch in exactly this kind of situation. We didn't do anything wrong. That doesn't matter, not when it comes to optics. Vivian stood up, pacing. You need to distance yourself from me, publicly. Tell people it was a mistake, that nothing's actually happening between us. I'm not doing that. Ethan, your scholarship, I don't care about the scholarship. You should care. You need it. Maya needs it. We need you more. The words stopped her cold. They stared at each other across the kitchen, and Ethan saw the exact moment she understood that he meant it, that he'd already chosen her, consequences be damned. This is going to get worse before it gets better, she said quietly. I know. Sterling's going to come after both of us now. Let him. You keep saying that like you're invincible. You're not. None of us are. No, but we're together. That's got to count for something. Vivian crossed to him, taking his face in her hands. I don't deserve you. Yeah, you do. She kissed him, desperate and grateful and scared, and Ethan kissed her back with everything he had, because the fight was just beginning, and they both knew it. But at least they weren't fighting alone anymore. The meeting with Dr. Chen was worse than Ethan had anticipated. She sat behind her desk, looking tired and disappointed, which somehow felt worse than if she'd been angry. There was a printed copy of the photo on her desk, face down, but Ethan knew exactly what it showed. Sit down, she said. He sat. I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I need a direct answer. Are you in a romantic relationship with Vivian Laurent? Ethan thought about lying, about hedging, deflecting, buying himself time. Then he thought about Vivian in the kitchen that morning, terrified and trying to protect him by pushing him away. Yes, he said. Dr. Chen closed her eyes briefly. Do you have any idea what you've done? I fell in love with someone. That's not a crime. It's a conflict of interest. She's your landlord. She controls your living situation, which directly impacts your ability to complete your degree. I'm paying fair market rent. There's no financial impropriety. That's not the point. The appearance of impropriety is enough. Dr. Chen opened a folder on her desk. Dean Sterling has filed a formal complaint. He's alleging that you've been manipulating Miss Laurent to secure preferential housing arrangements, and that your relationship represents an abuse of your position as a student. That's insane. If anything, she's been... Ethan stopped himself. She's been what? Nothing. It doesn't matter. It matters very much. Because right now, there's a narrative forming that you're taking advantage of a vulnerable woman for personal gain, and unless you can provide a compelling counter-narrative, that's the story that's going to stick. Ethan felt anger rising in his chest. Vivian isn't vulnerable. She's one of the strongest people I've ever met. That may be true, but it's not how people see her. They see a woman who's been fighting the university for years, who's isolated, who... Dr. Chen hesitated. Who has a history of poor judgment in relationships? You mean Richard Calloway? I mean that there's precedent for people taking advantage of her trust. Sterling's making that connection explicit in his complaint. So what happens now? The scholarship committee is meeting on Friday, 3 days from now. They're going to review your case. Dr. Chen leaned forward. Ethan, I'm going to be honest with you. The odds are not good. Sterling has influence on that committee, and he's pushing hard for your removal from the program. Can he actually do that? He can recommend it, and given the circumstances, the committee will likely follow that recommendation. Ethan felt the floor dropping out from under him. So I lose my scholarship? Possibly. At minimum, you'll be placed on academic probation pending a full review of your conduct. My conduct has been fine. I haven't done anything wrong. You entered into a romantic relationship with your landlord while living in university-affiliated housing. That shows poor judgment at best, manipulation at worst. It shows that I'm human, that I fell for someone while trying to survive an impossible situation. Ethan stood up. And if the committee wants to punish me for that, fine, but I'm not going to apologize for it. Sit down, Ethan. Why? So you can tell me more about how I've destroyed my future? I got it. Message received. Sit down. Something in her voice made him comply. Dr. Chen pulled out another folder, thicker than the first. This is every piece of work you've submitted in the past 18 months. Assignments, papers, your thesis proposal. Do you know what they all have in common? No idea. They're excellent, every single one. Your thesis on educational trauma and resilience in single-parent households? It's some of the best graduate work I've seen in 15 years of teaching. She looked at him. You're a good student, Ethan. More than that, you're a good person who's trying to do right by his daughter in circumstances that would break most people. And I'll be damned if I'm going to let Sterling destroy your career because you fell in love with the wrong person at the wrong time. Ethan felt something loosen in his chest. What are you saying? I'm saying I'm going to fight for you at that committee meeting. I'm going to present your academic record, your thesis work, and evidence that you've been nothing but professional in your role as a TA and a student. I'm going to argue that your personal life is exactly that, personal, and not grounds for academic punishment. Sterling will fight back. Let him. He's got politics and influence, but I've got facts and documentation. We'll see which one wins. Why are you doing this? Dr. Chen smiled slightly. Because somebody has to, and it might as well be me. The words echoed what Ethan had said to Vivian, and he felt gratitude wash over him so strong it was almost painful. Thank you, he managed. Don't thank me yet. This fight isn't over. She closed the folders. But Ethan, you need to be prepared for the possibility that we lose. If the committee decides against you, you'll lose your scholarship and probably your place in the program. What will you do then? He thought about Maya, about Vivian, about the life they were trying to build in that old house with its open doors. I don't know, he said honestly, but I'll figure it out. He left Dr. Chen's office and found Sterling waiting in the hallway. Mr. Cole? Sterling's smile was sharp as broken glass. I hear you've been having a difficult morning. Go to hell. Such hostility, and after I've been trying so hard to help you understand the error of your ways. Ethan kept walking. Sterling followed. You know what's going to happen on Friday, don't you? The committee will review your case, find that you violated the student code of conduct, and recommend your immediate removal from the program. No scholarship, no degree, no future. We'll see. Yes, we will. And when it happens, I want you to remember that I tried to warn you, that I gave you multiple opportunities to distance yourself from Ms. Laurent and salvage your academic career. Sterling moved in front of him, blocking his path. But you were too proud, too stupid, too convinced that you were some kind of hero, and now you're going to lose everything. I haven't lost yet. You lost the moment you kissed her on that balcony. You just don't know it yet. Ethan stepped around him and kept walking, but Sterling's voice followed him down the hall. When you're packing up your things, when you're explaining to your daughter why you have to leave, when you're back at that motel wondering how it all fell apart, remember that I gave you a choice, and you made the wrong one. Ethan didn't respond, just kept walking until he was outside, standing in the cold November air, trying to control the shaking in his hands. His phone buzzed. A text from Vivian. How bad? He typed back. Committee meeting Friday. Might lose the scholarship. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. I'm so sorry. This is my fault. It's not. Stop saying that. Come home. We need to talk. Home. She'd called the house home, and something about that word made his chest ache. He drove back, taking the long way to clear his head. The house looked different somehow in daylight, less imposing, more tired. The new roof was only half finished, scaffolding still wrapped around the northwest corner. The foundation work had torn up half the lawn, leaving muddy scars across what had been pristine grass. Inside, he found Vivian in the library, surrounded by legal documents. Hey, he said. She looked up and he could see she'd been crying. I'm withdrawing my funding request. What? No. I have to. If I drop the request, tell the trust board I've reconsidered, maybe Sterling will back off. Maybe the committee will see you're not involved anymore. Vivian, stop. I won't let you lose your scholarship because of me. Ethan crossed the room and took the papers out of her hands. Listen to me very carefully. You are not withdrawing anything. You're not sacrificing the house to save me. We're in this together, remember? Together doesn't work if you're not here anymore. Then we make sure I stay here. How? Sterling has all the power. He's on the committee, he's filed the complaint, he's been building a case against both of us for weeks. What chance do we have? We have the truth. We have documentation. We have Dr. Chen fighting for me and Dr. Morrison on your side. Ethan sat down next to her. And we have each other. That's not nothing. It might not be enough. Maybe not. But it's what we've got, so we're going to use it. Vivian leaned against him, and he wrapped an arm around her shoulders. They sat like that for a long time, not talking, just being together in the quiet. Finally, she said, Maya knows. Knows what? About us. She asked me this morning if you and I were dating now. What did you tell her? The truth. That we're figuring things out, but yes, we care about each other. Vivian looked up at him. She said she was glad, that she liked having us both around. She said something similar to me last week, kept insisting the gala was a date. Smart kid. Too smart sometimes. They fell quiet again, and Ethan thought about Maya's face when he'd have to tell her they might have to leave. The way her smile would falter, just for a second, before she'd hug him and say it was okay. He couldn't let that happen. Not again. The next few days passed in a blur of preparation. Dr. Chen worked on Ethan's defense, compiling evidence of his academic performance and professional conduct. Vivian pulled together every document related to his tenancy, proving the rent was fair market rate and the arrangement was above board. They barely slept. Ethan could hear Vivian moving around on the third floor at all hours, and twice he went up to find her still working at 2 a.m. "You need to rest," he'd say. "So do you. I'm not the one with broken ribs that never healed right. Low blow, Cole." But she'd come to bed, his bed now, more nights than not, and they'd lie there in the darkness talking about everything and nothing until exhaustion finally pulled them under. Maya noticed the tension, started being extra careful, extra quiet, like she was afraid one wrong move would shatter the fragile stability they'd built. "Are we going to have to leave?" she asked one night at dinner. Ethan and Vivian exchanged looks. "We're working very hard to make sure that doesn't happen," Vivian said. "But it might happen?" "It might," Ethan admitted, "but we're fighting it, okay? We're not giving up." "Okay." Maya pushed food around her plate. "I don't want to leave. I like it here. I like my room and the garden, and—" She looked at Vivian. "And you?" "I like you too," Vivian said softly. "So we're staying, right?" "We're trying, baby," Ethan said. That night after Maya was asleep, Vivian found Ethan in the library. "I have an idea," she said. "And you're going to hate it." "That's a great opening." "I'm serious." She sat down across from him. "What if I testify at the committee meeting?" "Absolutely not." "Hear me out. No, you're not putting yourself in Sterling's crosshairs more than you already are." "I'm already completely in his crosshairs. But if I testify, I can control the narrative. I can explain that our relationship developed naturally, that there's no manipulation or impropriety, that you've been nothing but professional and helpful." "They'll tear you apart." "Let them try. I've been dealing with Sterling for 5 years. I can handle a committee meeting." Ethan shook his head. "It's too risky." "Everything about this situation is risky. But sitting back and hoping Dr. Chen can win this alone? That's not a strategy. That's wishful thinking. Vivian, I love you." The words stopped him cold. She'd never said them before. Neither had he, though the feeling had been there for weeks. "I love you," she said again, "and I'm not going to sit quietly while Sterling tries to destroy your future. I'm going to fight, and you're going to let me." Ethan looked at her, this brilliant, stubborn, impossible woman who'd somehow become the center of his world in less than 2 months. "I love you too," he said, "and I hate this plan. But you're not saying no. I'm saying I wish there was another way." "There isn't." Vivian moved to sit beside him. "We play the hand we're dealt. And right now, this is the best card we have." Friday arrived too fast. The scholarship committee met in a conference room that felt too small and too formal, with 7 members sitting along one side of a table, while Ethan sat alone on the other. Dr. Chen was there, but not as a voting member, just as his advocate. Sterling was there too, looking satisfied. The committee chair, an older man Ethan didn't know, opened the meeting. "We're here to review the case of Ethan Cole, graduate student in educational psychology, regarding allegations of conduct unbecoming a scholarship recipient. Dean Sterling has filed a formal complaint. Mr. Cole, you have the right to respond." Ethan stood. His hands were shaking, but his voice was steady. "I understand the concerns about my living arrangement with Ms. Laurent, but I want to be clear, I've done nothing improper. I pay fair market rent for my housing. I've maintained my academic standing. I've fulfilled all my responsibilities as a TA and a student. The fact that I developed feelings for my landlord doesn't change any of that." "The concern," Sterling interjected, "is not just about feelings. It's about judgment. Mr. Cole entered into a relationship with someone who has significant control over his living situation. That shows poor decision-making at best." "With respect," Dr. Chen said, "Mr. Cole's personal relationships are not grounds for academic discipline, unless they interfere with his performance, which they haven't. His grades are excellent, his thesis is on track, and he's received outstanding evaluations from the courses he's assisted with. She slid a folder across the table. The committee members began reviewing it. Furthermore, Dr. Chen continued, the relationship in question developed organically over several weeks. It's not as if Mr. Cole moved in with romantic intentions. He was placed in affordable housing through legitimate means and happened to develop feelings for another resident of that property. This is not manipulation. It's human nature. A convenient narrative, Sterling said, but it doesn't address the fundamental issue. Ms. Laurent is not just another resident. She owns the property and sets the terms of tenancy. That power imbalance. The door opened. Vivian walked in, dressed in a business suit that made her look like she was about to argue before the Supreme Court. Ms. Laurent, the committee chair said, looking confused, this is a closed meeting. I'm here to testify regarding the complaint against Mr. Cole. I believe I have relevant information. Sterling's face went red. This is highly irregular. So is filing baseless complaints against graduate students because you're upset about property disputes? Vivian shot back. But here we are. The committee chair looked uncertain. I'm not sure we can allow testimony from someone who's not a member of the university community. I'm a property manager for a university historical trust. That makes me part of the community. Vivian pulled out a chair and sat down without waiting for permission. And I'm going to speak whether you allow it or not, so we might as well make it official. Ethan wanted to kiss her and strangle her in equal measure. The committee chair sighed. Very well, but keep it brief. Thank you. Vivian folded her hands on the table. I want to address the allegations that Mr. Cole has been manipulating me or taking advantage of some perceived vulnerability. These allegations are false. Mr. Cole moved into my property because I offered him affordable housing at a difficult time in his life. Over the course of his tenancy, he has been professional, respectful, and helpful. He's assisted with property maintenance, organized documentation for repair funding, and generally been an exemplary tenant. And the romantic relationship? One of the committee members asked. Developed naturally over time as we got to know each other. I initiated the first kiss, not him. I asked him to attend the gala with me. If anyone is guilty of inappropriate behavior, it's me, not Mr. Cole. Sterling leaned forward. Miss Laurent, with all due respect, you have a documented history of poor judgment in relationships. The university has records of the incident with Richard Calloway. You mean the incident where a man you employed tried to manipulate me into giving up my property rights? Vivian's voice could have cut steel. That incident? I didn't employ Richard Calloway. No, but you worked with him. You knew what he was doing, and when I exposed his scheme, you swept it under the rug to avoid embarrassment. Vivian turned to the committee. Dean Sterling has been trying to remove me from the property management position for 5 years. Every relationship I have, every choice I make, he frames as evidence of instability or poor judgment. This complaint against Mr. Cole is just his latest attempt to isolate me and undermine my position. That's a serious accusation, the committee chair said. It's also true, and I have documentation to prove it. Vivian pulled out a folder Ethan hadn't known she was carrying. This is every letter, every inspection report, every complaint Sterling has filed against me in the past 5 years. Notice the pattern? Every time I hire a contractor, he questions my judgment. Every time I request funding, he demands more documentation. Every time I form any kind of professional or personal relationship, he investigates it. She slid the folder across the table. The committee members started passing it around. Mr. Cole is not taking advantage of me, Vivian continued. He's supporting me. There's a difference. And the fact that we've developed romantic feelings doesn't change the fundamental reality that our arrangement is above board, our rent agreement is fair, and neither of us has done anything wrong. The room was silent. Then Sterling stood up. This is a character assassination disguised as testimony. Miss Laurent is trying to deflect from her own poor judgment by attacking me. Your poor judgment is documented in that folder, Vivian interrupted. Mine is a matter of opinion. You've been fighting the university for years over a property that's falling apart because you've been blocking the funding I need to repair it while simultaneously claiming I'm not maintaining it properly. It's a trap, and everyone in this room knows it. Sterling's composure finally cracked. You're unstable. Everyone knows it. You live alone in that massive house with your bizarre rules. You drive away anyone who tries to help you, and now you've manipulated a vulnerable single father into a relationship to... Enough! The committee chair's voice cut through the room. Dean Sterling, sit down. But sit down. Sterling sat, his face purple with rage. The committee chair looked at Vivian, then at Ethan, then at the folder of documentation. This committee will take a 15-minute recess to review the materials presented. Mr. Cole, Ms. Laurent, please wait outside. Ethan and Vivian stepped into the hallway. The moment the door closed behind them, Ethan turned to her. That was insane. It was necessary. You just accused a university dean of systematic harassment in front of a committee. Because it's true. Vivian leaned against the wall. I'm tired of being quiet, tired of letting him control the narrative. If I'm going down, I'm taking him with me. You're not going down. We don't know that yet. They stood in tense silence for the full 15 minutes. When the door finally opened, Dr. Chen gestured them back inside. The committee members looked uncomfortable. Sterling looked like he was about to have a stroke. The chair spoke. After reviewing the evidence presented, this committee has determined that the complaint filed by Dean Sterling lacks sufficient merit to warrant disciplinary action against Mr. Cole. Ethan felt his knees nearly buckle. Furthermore, the chair continued, we have concerns about the pattern of behavior documented in Ms. Laurent's evidence. The committee will be recommending a full review of Dean Sterling's interactions with the Laurent Property Trust to ensure all actions have been appropriate and above board. This is outrageous, Sterling sputtered. I have served this university for... Your service is noted, Dean Sterling, as are the concerning patterns in your documentation. The chair looked at Ethan. Mr. Cole, your scholarship will continue. You will remain in good standing in your program. This matter is closed. Thank you, Ethan managed. As for you, Ms. Laurent, while we appreciate your testimony, please understand that any future concerns should be brought through official channels rather than committee meetings. Understood, Vivian said, though I would point out that official channels have been remarkably unresponsive for the past 5 years. The chair's lips twitched, almost a smile. Noted. This meeting is adjourned. They filed out, and Ethan felt like he was floating. In the hallway, Dr. Chen grabbed his arm. That was closer than it should have been, she said. But you survived, both of you. Thanks to you. Thank Miss Laurent. That testimony was either brilliant or career suicide, possibly both. Dr. Chen looked at Vivian. You made an enemy today. I already had an enemy, Vivian said. Today I just stopped pretending I didn't. Sterling emerged from the conference room, his face a mask of cold fury. He walked past them without a word, but Ethan saw the look he gave Vivian, pure hatred. This wasn't over, not by a long shot, but they'd won this battle. And that had to count for something. They drove home in silence, the weight of what had just happened settling over them. When they pulled into the driveway, Maya was waiting on the front porch. Mrs. Chen from next door must have dropped her off from school. Did you win? She called out. Yeah, Ethan said, getting out of the car. We won. Maya launched herself at him, and he caught her, holding her tight while she cheered. Does that mean we're staying? We're staying. Forever? Ethan looked at Vivian over his daughter's head. As long as we want to. That night, after Maya was asleep, Ethan and Vivian sat in the library with glasses of wine they were too exhausted to drink. Sterling's going to retaliate, Vivian said. I know. He's going to make our lives hell. Probably. Are you scared? Terrified, Ethan admitted. But I'm also done running. Done letting people like him control my life. Me too. Vivian set down her wine glass. I called Dr. Morrison after the meeting. She thinks there might be grounds for a formal complaint against Sterling. If we can prove he's been systematically blocking property funding while demanding impossible standards, that's a fight for another day, Ethan said. Today, let's just enjoy the fact that we're still here. Together. Together. They sat in comfortable silence, and Ethan thought about how much had changed in 2 months. From desperate and homeless to fighting university politics alongside a woman he loved in a house that was slowly becoming home. It wasn't perfect. The house was still falling apart, Sterling was still circling, and there were 100 problems waiting to be solved. But they were solving them together now, and that made all the difference. Vivian's phone buzzed. She checked it, and her expression shifted. "What is it?" Ethan asked. "Email from the trust board. They've approved the full funding request, all 83,000. Ethan sat up. "Seriously?" "Dr. Morrison must have pushed it through after the committee meeting. She says—" Vivian read from the screen. "She says the board was impressed with the documentation and concerned about the delays in processing the request. They've authorized immediate disbursement." "That's amazing." "It's more than amazing. It's—" Vivian's voice cracked. "It means I can actually fix the house. Really fix it, not just patch and pray." Ethan pulled her close, and she buried her face in his shoulder. He felt her shaking and realized she was crying, relief and exhaustion and maybe joy all mixed together. "It's going to be okay," he said. "I know, I've been fighting for so long I forgot what winning felt like." "Get used to it. We're on a roll." She laughed through the tears, and Ethan held her tighter. Outside, the November wind rattled the windows. The house creaked and settled around them, old bones protesting but still standing, still home. The $83,000 arrived in the trust account on a Tuesday morning, and by Wednesday afternoon the house was swarming with contractors. Vivian moved through the chaos like a general commanding troops, pointing out problem areas, approving work orders, checking invoices with the kind of attention to detail that made even experienced contractors nervous. Ethan watched her from the library doorway, coffee in hand, and marveled at the transformation. This wasn't the exhausted woman who'd been barely holding things together 2 months ago. This was someone who'd remembered what it felt like to have resources and control and a fighting chance. "Your lady's intense," one of the roofers said, passing by with a load of shingles. "She's not my lady," Ethan said automatically, then stopped. "Actually, yeah, she is." The roofer grinned. "Good for you, man. She seems like she knows what she wants." That's one way to put it. The work took 3 weeks. 3 weeks of noise and dust and workers tracking mud through the hallways. 3 weeks of Maya doing homework in the library while power tools screamed overhead. 3 weeks of Vivian cross-referencing every invoice against the original estimates, making sure every dollar was accounted for. But slowly, the house transformed. The foundation was reinforced with steel supports. The roof got new shingles and proper flashing. The electrical system was updated to code. The windows were resealed, the heating system overhauled, the chimney rebuilt from the ground up. By mid-December, the work was done. Ethan stood in the front yard one evening, looking up at the mansion, and barely recognized it. It still had the same bones, the same dark brick and tall windows and ivy-covered walls, but it looked solid now. Permanent. Like it planned to stand for another 140 years out of pure stubbornness. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Vivian said, coming to stand beside him. "It really is. I'd forgotten what it looked like when it wasn't falling apart." She slipped her hand into his. "Thank you." "I didn't do anything. You're the one who fought for the funding." "You gave me a reason to fight. That's not nothing." They stood there in the cold December air, watching lights come on in Maya's window as she got ready for bed. "I need to tell you something," Vivian said. Ethan's stomach tightened. Those words never led anywhere good. "Okay." Sterling filed a formal complaint with the university president last week about my testimony at the committee meeting. Of course he did. The president's office called me in yesterday. They wanted to discuss the allegations I made about Sterling's conduct regarding the property trust. And I provided documentation, all of it. Every blocked funding request, every unreasonable inspection demand, every interaction where he overstepped his authority. Vivian's voice was calm, but Ethan could hear the steel underneath. "They're launching an investigation." "That's good, right? It's complicated. If they find evidence of misconduct, Sterling could be removed from his position. But if they don't, if they decide I'm just a disgruntled property manager making accusations, it could backfire badly." "What would backfire look like?" "They could remove me from the management position, install someone else to oversee the property, essentially give Sterling everything he's been fighting for." Ethan turned to face her fully. "Do you regret it, going after him?" "Not for a second." Vivian met his eyes. "I'm tired of being afraid, tired of letting him control my life through intimidation. Whatever happens, at least I fought back." "We fought back," Ethan corrected. "You're not alone in this anymore." "No, I'm not." She smiled, and even in the dim evening light, it was genuine. That's still strange to me sometimes, having someone on my side. Get used to it. I'm not going anywhere. They went inside where Maya was waiting with hot chocolate she'd made herself. Too sweet and slightly lumpy, but they drank it anyway because she was so proud of herself. The investigation into Sterling took 6 weeks. During that time, life in the house settled into something almost normal. Ethan finished his fall semester with strong grades. Maya thrived in school, making friends and bringing home art projects that Vivian insisted on hanging in the library. The three of them developed routines: breakfast together before school, homework at the kitchen table, movie nights on Fridays where Maya got to pick, and always chose something with princesses or talking animals. The open-door policy remained, though Ethan noticed it bothered him less now. It had never been about control, he realized. It had been about safety, about a woman who'd been so thoroughly betrayed that transparency was the only way she could feel secure in her own home. And slowly, as trust deepened, some of the rules relaxed. Vivian started closing the bathroom door when she showered. Not all the way, but most of it. Maya's bedroom door stood fully open during the day, but got pulled halfway closed at night, giving her the illusion of privacy while still meeting the house rules. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. In January, the university president's office released its findings. Ethan was in class when the news broke, his phone buzzing with notifications until he finally checked it between lectures. The official statement was carefully worded, but the substance was clear. Dean Christopher Sterling had been found to have overstepped his authority in multiple instances regarding the Laurent Property Trust. He was being removed from his position as Dean of Development and reassigned to a non-administrative role pending further review. Ethan called Vivian immediately. "Did you see?" he asked when she picked up. "I saw." Her voice was shaking. "They're also recommending changes to the trust agreement. More oversight, clearer guidelines for funding requests, limits on when the university can challenge the property manager's decisions. That's everything you wanted. It's more than I hoped for." She laughed, high and slightly hysterical. "Ethan, I won. After 5 years, I actually won." "We won," he said. "Together." "Together," she echoed. That evening, Dr. Morrison came to the house with champagne and stories about Sterling's fall from grace that were probably inappropriate but deeply satisfying. "He's threatening to sue, of course," she said, settled in one of the library's leather chairs with a glass in hand. "Claims the investigation was biased, that you manipulated the evidence, all the usual nonsense people spout, when they've been caught doing exactly what they've been accused of." "Will the lawsuit go anywhere?" Vivian asked. "Doubt it." His own documentation condemned him. All those reports demanding impossible standards, blocking reasonable funding requests, showing up for unscheduled inspections. It painted a picture of systematic harassment. The university's legal team advised settling quietly rather than risking a trial. "What kind of settlement?" "They're buying out his contract. Early retirement with full benefits if he agrees not to pursue legal action or speak publicly about the situation." Dr. Morrison sipped her champagne. "Personally, I think they're being too generous, but the president wants this to go away quietly." "So it's over," Ethan said. "This particular fight is over. But there will always be other fights, other people who want what you have." Dr. Morrison looked at Vivian. "The question is whether you're prepared to keep defending it." "I am," Vivian said without hesitation. "I'm not going anywhere." "Good, because the trust is going to need strong management for years to come." Dr. Morrison set down her glass. "There's something else. The board voted to extend your property management contract indefinitely. No more 5-year reviews, no more questions about your competency. As long as you maintain the property according to the revised guidelines, it's yours to manage." Vivian's hand found Ethan's, squeezing tight. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. You earned this, both of you." Dr. Morrison stood. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have 3 other house calls to make tonight. Board work never ends." After she left, Ethan and Vivian sat in the library in stunned silence. "It's really over," Vivian finally said. "The Sterling part is over. Everything else is just beginning." "Everything else meaning what?" Ethan turned to face her. "Meaning we get to figure out what comes next, without someone actively trying to destroy us." "That's going to take some getting used to." "Yeah, but I think we can manage." They kissed, slow and sweet, and Ethan thought about how far they'd come from that first day when he'd stood in the driveway, desperate and out of options, reading a sign that said, "No closed doors." Maya's voice floated down from upstairs. "Are you guys being gross again?" They broke apart, laughing. "Define gross," Ethan called back. "It's kissing. That's gross. You liked it when we kissed in the movies last week." "That's different. Movie kissing is romantic. Parent kissing is gross." Vivian raised her eyebrows at Ethan. "Parent? She's been calling you that for a week. I meant to mention it." "And you're okay with that?" "Are you?" Vivian was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled, that real, unguarded smile that Ethan had learned to treasure. "Yeah, I am." Winter gave way to early spring, and with it came changes no one had anticipated. Dr. Chen approached Ethan in late February with a proposal. The university was establishing a new community outreach program focused on providing educational support to single-parent families. They wanted him to help design and run it. "It's a paid position," she explained over coffee in her office. "Half-time, so you can finish your degree. But it's real work, real impact, and it plays directly into your thesis research." "Why me?" "Because you've lived it. You understand what single parents need in ways most academics don't. And your work on the Laurent property documentation showed you can manage complex projects while maintaining academic rigor." "I don't know if I'm qualified." "You're more qualified than you think. And Ethan, this could turn into a full-time position after you graduate. Director of Family Educational Support. It's a new role, but the funding is solid." Ethan thought about it for exactly 10 seconds. "When do I start?" The job was harder than he'd expected and more rewarding than he'd imagined. He worked with families navigating exactly the same struggles he'd faced. Single parents trying to finish degrees while raising kids, people living in cars or shelters or barely stable housing, everyone holding on by their fingernails and hoping it was enough. He connected them with resources, helped them find affordable housing, taught them how to navigate university bureaucracy. And every time he helped someone secure stable housing or emergency funding or just someone to listen, he thought about Vivian opening her door to a desperate stranger because somebody had to help. Maya turned 8 in March, and they threw her a party in the mansion's garden. 20 kids running through the grounds, playing hide-and-seek in the hedges, eating cake under the oak trees. Vivian had been nervous about the chaos, but she'd watched Maya's face light up when her friends arrived, and that was all the permission she needed. "This is the best birthday ever," Maya announced, frosting smeared across her face. "Better than laser tag last year?" Ethan asked. "Way better. Because I get to share my house." "It's not your house, baby. It feels like my house." Maya looked at Vivian. "Is that okay? That it feels like mine?" "More than okay," Vivian said. "It feels like yours because it is yours. This is your home now." Maya hugged her, and Ethan saw Vivian's eyes go bright with unshed tears. Later, after the party had ended and the last parent had picked up their sugar-high child, they sat in the garden watching the sun set. "I've been thinking," Vivian said. "Dangerous." "Shut up." She elbowed him gently. "I've been thinking about the house, about what it means, what it could be. And what if we opened it up more, not as a rental property, but as a resource? There are 6 bedrooms we're not using. What if we provided temporary housing to families in crisis? Parents finishing degrees, people escaping domestic situations, anyone who needs a safe place to land." Ethan looked at her. "That's a huge undertaking." "I know, but we have the space, we have the trust funding for maintenance, and you're already working with these populations through the outreach program. It makes sense." "It would mean more people in the house, more open doors, less privacy." "I'm getting better with that," Vivian said. "The doors don't have to be quite so open anymore. I've been thinking about revising the rule. Maybe doors can be closed sometimes, as long as people are honest about what's happening behind them." "That's progress." "It's trust, which I'm learning to do again thanks to you." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, and Ethan turned the idea over in his mind. It made sense. It was ambitious and complicated, and would probably drive them both crazy at times. It was also exactly the kind of thing Vivian would do, take her own pain and transform it into something that helped others. "Let's do it," he said. "Really?" "Really. But we do it right. Proper applications, background checks, clear house rules, and we start small, maybe 1 or 2 families to see how it works." "Agreed." Vivian leaned against him. "This is going to be a lot of work." "Everything worth doing is." They applied to the university's housing assistance program in April and received approval in May. By June, they had their first family, a single mother named Sarah with twin boys, escaping an abusive marriage and trying to finish her nursing degree. She moved into the second-floor east wing, eyes wide and grateful, and a little bit scared. "The doors stay open?" she asked, looking at the sign Vivian had never taken down. "Mostly open," Vivian corrected. "We're working on updating the official policy, but the spirit is the same. No secrets, no hidden spaces. Everyone visible and accountable." "I can work with that." Sarah looked around at the room, clean, furnished, safe. "This is more than I hoped for." "It's home," Vivian said, "for as long as you need it." Ethan watched the exchange and felt something settle in his chest. This was right. This was what the house was meant to be, not a fortress against the world, but a refuge for people who needed one. Summer passed in a blur of activity. Sarah's twins became Maya's constant companions, tearing through the house and garden with the kind of energy only 8-year-olds possessed. A second family moved in, a young father named Marcus whose wife had died in childbirth, leaving him with an infant daughter and no idea how to manage grad school and single parenthood simultaneously. The house was louder, messier, more chaotic than Ethan had ever seen it, and Vivian, who'd spent 5 years living in near isolation, seemed to thrive on it. "I forgot what this felt like," she said one evening, watching from the library window as all the kids played in the garden. "Having a house full of life." "You like it?" "I love it. Even when the twins broke that vase last week. Even when Marcus's baby cries at 3 in the morning. I love that this place is being used the way it was meant to be. Your grandfather would be proud." "I hope so." She turned from the window. "There's something I want to ask you." "Okay." "Move upstairs with me. Officially. Not just spending nights, but actually move your things to the 3rd floor. Make it our space." Ethan's heart kicked against his ribs. "That's a big step." "I know. And if it's too much, if you're not ready." "I'm ready." He crossed to her, taking her hands. "I've been ready. I was just waiting for you to be ready too. I'm ready. For all of it. You, me, this life we're building. I'm done being scared." They kissed, and through the window Ethan could hear Maya laughing, the twins shouting about something important only to them, Marcus singing softly to his daughter. This was family. Not the traditional kind, not the kind television promised, but real and messy, and held together by choice rather than obligation. It was everything. Ethan moved to the 3rd floor in late July, and Maya threw a fit about being left alone on the 2nd floor until they explained she'd have Sarah and the twins nearby. Then she decided it was actually better because she could have girl talk with Sarah, who apparently understood about American Girl dolls in ways Ethan never would. The 3rd floor became their sanctuary, a space that was theirs alone, where doors could close and privacy was possible, and Vivian could let down the walls she'd built so carefully over the years. But even there, even in their private space, they usually left the bedroom door cracked open. Not because they had to anymore, but because it felt right. Because transparency had become less a rule and more a way of being. In August, the university formally announced Ethan's permanent position as Director of Family Educational Support. The salary was modest but stable, and more importantly, the work mattered. He was helping people the way Vivian had helped him, giving them a chance when they were out of options. The thesis defense came in early September, and Ethan stood before his committee with 2 years of research on educational resilience in single-parent families. He talked about trauma and adaptation, about support systems and community resources, about what happened when people were given stability instead of judgment. He didn't mention that most of his recent research had come from living in a house full of families fighting to rebuild their lives. Didn't mention that his best data came from Sarah's journey through nursing school, or Marcus learning to parent alone, or his own experience moving from desperate to stable. But the committee knew anyway. Dr. Chen had made sure of it. "This is exceptional work, Mr. Cole," the committee chair said after his defense. "Not just academically rigorous, but practically applicable. We're pleased to pass you with distinction." Ethan had his doctorate. After years of fighting, failing, barely surviving, he'd made it. Vivian was waiting outside the defense room with Maya, both of them bouncing on their toes with anticipation. "Well?" Maya demanded. "I passed." She screamed and launched herself at him, and Vivian was right behind her, wrapping both of them in a hug that felt like home. I'm so proud of you, Vivian whispered. Couldn't have done it without you. You could have, but I'm glad you didn't have to. They celebrated that night with everyone in the house. Sarah and her twins, Marcus and his daughter, even Mrs. Chen from next door who'd become an honorary grandmother to every kid in the mansion. They ate too much pizza, the kids ran wild through the rooms, and Ethan looked around at the chaos and thought about how different this was from the silent, empty house he'd first walked into. Better. So much better. October arrived with cool air and changing leaves, and with it came a letter from the university president's office. Ethan opened it in the library, Vivian reading over his shoulder. It was an official commendation for his work with the Family Educational Support Program. Recognition for helping 17 families secure stable housing, assisting 12 single parents in completing their degrees, and establishing partnerships with 5 community organizations. 17 families, Vivian read. That's incredible. We've helped 17 families, Ethan corrected. This isn't my program. It's ours. The house, the stability, the model we built, that's what makes it work. Still, you should be proud. I am, but not because of the numbers. Because every one of those families is someone who was where I was 2 years ago, desperate and out of options. And now they're not. Vivian kissed his cheek. You're a good man, Ethan Cole. I'm a man who got lucky. You opened your door to a stranger who had nothing to offer but problems. You had plenty to offer. You just didn't know it yet. They were still in the library when Maya came running in, breathless and excited. Dad, Vivian, come see! They followed her outside to the garden where she'd been playing with the twins. She pointed to the oak tree where someone had carved initials into the bark years ago. Look, someone wrote forever under our initials. Ethan looked closer. Sure enough, under the VL that had been there for years, someone had carved EC plus MC, and below it all, in fresher cuts, forever. Did you do this? He asked Maya. Maybe. She grinned. Is it okay? Ethan looked at Vivian, who was trying not to cry. It's perfect, Vivian said. Absolutely perfect. They stood in the garden as the sun set, the 3 of them plus Sarah and her twins and Marcus and his baby, all together in this house that had become so much more than just a building. This was what healing looked like, Ethan realized. Not perfect, not clean, not simple. Just people helping each other survive, choosing connection over isolation, building family from broken pieces. In November, on a Saturday morning when frost covered the garden, Ethan found Vivian standing in front of the house with a screwdriver in hand. What are you doing? He asked. She pointed to the sign, the one that said no closed doors. I'm taking it down. Are you sure? I'm sure. She worked the screws loose, and the brass plaque came free in her hands. This was never about the doors anyway. It was about trust. And I trust now. Trust you. Trust the people in this house. Trust myself to know when something's wrong without needing to see through every wall. She handed him the sign, and Ethan looked at the words that had defined his first months in this house. What are you going to replace it with? I have an idea. Vivian pulled a new plaque from her jacket pocket. Sarah helped me design it. The new sign was simple, carved in the same style as the old one, but the words were different. Doors may close. Hearts stay honest. What do you think? Vivian asked. I think it's perfect. She mounted it on the doorframe where the old sign had been, and it looked right, like it had always belonged there. They stood back looking at the house together. Thank you, Vivian said quietly. For what? For showing up desperate that day. For following the rules even when they were ridiculous. For standing up to Sterling. For loving me when I was too scared to be loved. She took his hand. For being exactly what I needed when I needed it most. You saved me too, Ethan said. You know that, right? I was drowning, and you threw me a lifeline. Everything I have now, the job, the degree, this family, it started with you opening that door. We saved each other. Yeah, we did. They went inside where breakfast was waiting and kids were arguing over pancakes and life was messy and loud and absolutely perfect. Maya ran up to Ethan with syrup on her face. Dad, can we go to the park later? Sure, baby. All of us? Like a family? Ethan looked at Vivian, who nodded. Yeah, he said. All of us. Like a family, because that's what they were now. Not traditional, not simple, held together by choice and trust, and the kind of love that had to be built brick by brick instead of assumed. But family nonetheless. The years that followed weren't easy. The house program grew, bringing new challenges and occasional conflicts. There were families that didn't work out, people who violated trust, moments when Vivian's old fears came rushing back and she wanted to lock everything down again. But they worked through it, together. Ethan's program expanded, eventually serving over 100 families across 3 university partnerships. Vivian became a consultant for other historical properties, trying to establish similar housing programs. Maya grew up in a house full of kids who came and went, learning early that family was something you built rather than something you were born into. Sterling never returned to the university. Last anyone heard, he'd moved to another state and taken a quiet position in real estate development. The investigation findings had been damaging enough that most institutions wouldn't touch him. Dr. Morrison served on the trust board until she retired at 75, ensuring that Vivian's position remained secure and the house's mission stayed true to its purpose. And the sign, the new one, the one about closed doors and honest hearts, stayed mounted by the entrance, greeting every person who came seeking shelter. Some nights, when the house was quiet and everyone was asleep, Ethan would stand in the doorway of their bedroom looking out at the hallway. Most doors were closed now, or nearly closed, privacy finally restored to a house that had been too transparent for too long. But the important things stayed open. Communication, honesty, trust, the things that actually mattered. Vivian would find him there sometimes, join him in the doorway, and they'd stand together in the darkness. "What are you thinking about?" she'd ask. "How far we've come. From desperate tenant and controlling landlord to this?" Something like that. "Would you do it again if you could go back to that first day?" Ethan thought about the fear, the uncertainty, the rules that made no sense, and the fights they'd survived, and all the moments when everything could have fallen apart. "In a heartbeat," he said. "Me too." They'd close the bedroom door then, most of the way, never quite all the way, and settle into bed together. Partners, lovers, parents, friends, all the roles they'd grown into, one day at a time. And in the morning, they'd open the door again and start over. Because that was the real lesson, Ethan realized. Life wasn't about being perfect or having all the answers. It was about showing up, doing the work, helping when you could, and asking for help when you couldn't. It was about opening doors when it mattered and closing them when it didn't. It was about trust, the kind you had to earn and maintain, and sometimes rebuild from scratch. Most of all, it was about choosing to stay. Through the hard parts, the scary parts, the moments when running would be easier. Choosing to plant roots and build something worth protecting. The house stood for another 100 years after that, sheltering hundreds of families who needed exactly what Ethan had needed that first desperate day. A chance, a home, and someone willing to believe they deserved both. And on the doorframe, through generations of new residents and fresh coats of paint, the sign remained, "Doors may close, hearts stay honest." A reminder that safety isn't found in absolute control or perfect transparency, but in the messy, complicated, beautiful work of trusting people enough to let them in. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, one of those people will trust you back. That's when you know you're home.